Chapter 2556. Yi Shiwen was afraid that he had some selfish motives and wanted to take the credit for retrieving the spring and autumn brush for himself. However, this was also human nature. None of the other geniuses who had received the news had reported it to their superiors. They all had the same thought. Yi Shiwen stayed in the city for a few more days. He had thought that the news would reach Jun Dingtian's ears. Then he could draw him out and get rid of this scourge in one fell swoop. He didn't expect that Jun Dingtian might still be in closed-door training. There was no news at all, and Yi Shiwen had waited for a few days in vain. Jun Dingtian is about to come out of closed-door training. After he comes out, he will go to his secret land. I'm afraid there will be a few alliances moving together. This is also why I want to ally with you. I'm not afraid of Jun Dingtian, Gu Shiying said frankly. It's okay. Yi Shiwen shrugged, indicating that he didn't care. But if Brother Yin wants to give me some advice, I'm more than happy to oblige. Why? Is there anyone else going for the spring and autumn brush? Yi Shiwen asked. That arcane pocket realm is somewhat related to the Confucian school, Gu Shiying said. It's the place where an unparalleled figure of our school perished. In fact, one of our 4 treasures of the Confucian school, the spring and autumn brush, is also in that arcane pocket realm. According to our calculations, the arcane pocket realm will open soon. What secret land? Yi Shiwen asked. Yi Shiwen now understood why Gu Shiying told him such a secret. Originally, she didn't need to tell him such a secret, but now she told him. It turned out that she wanted him to help her. The secret land was finally open, and Yi Shiwen finally met up with Gu Shiying. Over the past few hundred years, people had constantly used his title as the so-called #1 person to talk about things. Although many people were convinced, there were even more who were not convinced. This time, Gu Shiying didn't come alone. She had brought some experts with her, and many of them were in the sage realm. One could imagine how much the Confucian faction valued the spring and autumn brush this time. Since we are allies, we will naturally help. Yi Shiwen didn't pay too much attention to this matter. The scholarly spring and autumn brush was indeed good. However, it was a treasure with a clear owner. But this time, his opponent was not ordinary. He had already seen Yi Shiwen's strength, although it was just a glimpse, and Jun Dingtian's follower didn't even force him to use 10% of his strength. It was enough for him to see some clues. Oh, may I know what kind of news it is? Yi Shiwen immediately became spirited and asked. The Confucian faction retreated a certain distance to give the 2 of them room to fight. However, their divine senses were still locked onto the 2 of them. A battle of this level was something they had never seen before. After this incident, he realized that he had to find a way to get rid of Jun Dingtian. As the saying goes, the one who strikes first gains the upper hand, and the one who strikes later suffers. Yi Shiwen had thought about many things over the past month. Originally, he was a little puzzled. The Confucian faction had 4 great treasures, the 4 treasures of the study. Among them, the spring and autumn brush was the head of the 4 treasures of the study. Logically speaking, if he reported this to the Confucian faction, the real experts who would come should be the old antiques of the Confucian faction. The last time this secret territory opened was more than 1,000,000 years ago. It had been such a long time that many of the records were very unclear. According to the information from the Heaven Pavilion, someone had seen the reincarnation grass in it. Unfortunately, the opening time of the secret territory was about to end, and that person had not been able to harvest it. Spring and autumn brush? Is it the spring and autumn brush that writes everything in one stroke? Yi Shiwen frowned and said, Good. You're a straightforward person. Yen Bai didn't wait for Gu Shiying to respond, and said directly. Yi Shiwen smiled faintly, and the palm directly passed through his body. It was the redemption field. Ordinary attacks couldn't hit him at all, and would be diverted away. Junior Brother Yan's strength is many times stronger than when we fought that day. This kind of strength is completely incomparable. At this time, Gu Shiying's eyes didn't leave for a moment. He knew in his heart that he could gain a lot just by watching such a battle. There was a time when he thought that it was impossible to find any news about the reincarnation grass. After all, the entire Kerfurst Road was too big, and it was impossible for him to find it by himself. Even if he asked the Flame Lord, and even the ancient heavenly court helped him find it, the chances were still too slim. Among the helpers that Gu Shiring brought, his strength was undoubtedly the strongest. He was probably only a little bit weaker than Gu Shiring. Yes, it's that spring and autumn brush. That spring and autumn brush is very important to the Confucian faction. We must find it, Gu Shiring said. So I also hope that Brother Yi can lend me a hand when the time comes. The Confucian faction will definitely repay you. Don't forget that there were also many supporters on his side. If it was an ordinary person, he would naturally think that Yan Bai would win. Yan Bai was also one of the strongest in this generation of the Confucian faction. How could he be weak? Otherwise, how could he be on par with him? But this was also good. If they were all a group of old antiques, then there would be no room for him to display his strength. Even obtaining the reincarnation grass might be difficult. Use your full strength. It's impossible to defeat me with only this level of strength. Yi Shiwen thought of what Yan Bai said before. He immediately understood where Yan Bai's hostility came from. This kind of method was originally the method of the Eternal Realm. It was originally not rare, but after the enhancement of his Eye of Redemption, it suddenly became extremely powerful and extremely sharp. Senior brother, is this the helper you found? Although he is very famous, I don't know if he has the strength to do so. Suddenly, a young man stepped forward and looked at Yi Shiwen. I was just saying, Yan Bai said non-committally, but his eyes were fixed on Yi Shiwen. He did not look away at all, and his eyes were full of provocation. Originally, he only wanted to help Gu Shiring and eliminate Jun Dingtian. But now, his main goal had become the reincarnation grass. Compared to the reincarnation grass, Jun Dingtian could be said to be secondary. Just to get this information, Heaven Pavilion had spent a lot of effort. In the end, Yi Shiwen paid another billion in information fees to settle the matter with Heaven Pavilion. If that was the case, there would be no need to form an alliance with him. Who would dare to approach a group of old antiques at the peak of the Sage Realm? After all, Yan Bai and Gu Shiring had not fought many times. This person was handsome, dressed in a scholarly robe. The aura of a Confucian was extremely strong, but it was a little more extraordinary and aggressive. Some things did not need to be calculated to know that Jun Dingtian probably had a lot of plans against him behind his back. Instead of passively fighting back, it was better to take the initiative. As long as he did a clean job, even those old antiques could do nothing to him. Moreover, Gu Shiring had already said it like this, so he wasn't shameless to that extent. Although Yi Shiwen had not made a move, judging from the situation that he had shown, he was definitely qualified to be Yan Bai's opponent. Gu Shiring was also having a headache. Yan Bai and his people had always done things this way in the Confucian faction. As the saying goes, to repay grievances with justice. This was their way of doing things. But then, Yi Shiwen received news from Heaven Pavilion that they had found traces of the reincarnation grass. Coincidentally, this place was in the secret territory that Gu Shiring had mentioned before. Unfathomable. In that case, thank you for your help, Brother Yi. When the secret territory opens, I will naturally inform you, Gu Shiring said and cupped his hands. He had heard of the famous spring and autumn brush. In the past, the Confucian faction had produced several extremely powerful kings, and the spring and autumn brush was the personal instrument of one of the kings. It was said that it involved the mystery of time, and it could write the seasons with one stroke. It was very impressive. He did not have much time to waste. Well, apart from Jun Dingtian, there are several other masters of this generation who have also received the news. I'm afraid that I can't deal with them all by myself, Gu Shiring said. Yi Shiwen knew that Yan Bai must be unconvinced, but it didn't matter. After all, he was an old doctor who specialized in all kinds of unconvinced. Or it could be said that Gu Shiring valued the spring and autumn brush very much. As long as he could find the reincarnation grass, everything else could be put aside for the time being. Brother Yan Bai, Gu Shiring said with a slight frown, and even directly called his name. Fortunately, he had asked for help from Heaven Pavilion, a professional intelligence organization. It was indeed completely different. Yanbai was not much worse than Gu Shiying. Among the heroes of this generation, he could indeed be regarded as the first class. It was reasonable that he was unconvinced, especially those young people who thought that they were invincible. It was even more impossible for them to admit that there was someone who could suppress them. Both of them were great helpers that he had invited. How could they fight now? However, Yi Shiwen did not feel distressed at all. On the contrary, he was unusually excited. Finally, after more than 1,000 years, he had finally found the news of the reincarnation grass. Yi Qianqian's matter could not be delayed any longer. Although he had the enlightened mind ancient tree and the thunder liquid lake, the situation had deteriorated greatly. Originally, Yi Shiwen was just waiting calmly. Every day seemed like a torture. Just like this, he waited for a full month before Gu Shiying's news finally came. "Then I won't be polite," Yanbai said loudly, and then instantly struck out with one hand. He wanted to test Yi Shiwen's strength, and he was unwilling to use his full strength. Although Yanbai was a straightforward person, he was extremely talented. He was also a person that the Confucian faction focused on cultivating. In this generation, there were only a few who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Chapter 25:57. Only the word unfathomable could describe his feeling of Yi Shiwen's strength. Although he had not seen all of Yi Shiwen's strength, it was only the tip of the iceberg, but it had already made him feel this way. Therefore, he wanted to find a way to win Yi Shiwen over. Interesting. That's right. If you only have this little ability, then those who let you carry the title of the strongest person in the present age for so many years are all blind. Yanbai laughed out loud. He did not take it seriously. He leaped up, and a sword suddenly appeared in his hand. It was the Confucian sword that represented the Confucian school, the scholar's sword. The body of the sword carried a vast righteous qi. It directly slashed down towards Yi Shiwen, smashing the sky, with the momentum of splitting the world. Yi Shiwen finally became slightly serious. His body suddenly straightened, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The aura of the Divine Lord spread out in circles, like ripples. The righteousness in the sword qi that slashed down was smashed by Yi Shiwen's aura before it could even get close to Yi Shiwen. It could not get close to Yi Shiwen at all. Yanbai's righteousness could not cause any harm to Yi Shiwen at all. Yi Shiwen's aura burst out in an instant. It seemed as if a terrifying power had awakened inside his body and was constantly rising layer by layer. It seemed as if some kind of restriction had been opened inside his body and had instantly become extremely terrifying. Such an aura seemed to have exceeded the limit. It was a kind of terrifying aura that even the gods could hardly have. How is this possible? How can this aura be so terrifying? His realm is similar to mine. How can he be so much stronger than me? Really, even the divine kingdom is completely suppressed. It's too terrifying. An expert cried out in surprise. Many people could feel that the restless divine kingdoms in their bodies had been completely suppressed. It was extremely shocking. Even Gu Shiying was the same. Her eyes widened. This time, Yi Shiwen's strength was really revealed. Bang! Yanbai's scholar's sword fiercely slashed on Yi Shiwen's body. However, without the support of the righteousness, it could only cut on Yi Shiwen's body with a burst of sparks. It could not break through Yi Shiwen's defense. At this time, Yanbai finally realized how dreadful Yi Shiwen was. It seemed that he was even more dreadful than the rumors. Yi Shiwen had heard all kinds of rumors about how he had defeated his opponents with the help of a peerless ominous sword. It seemed that he had only succeeded by relying on a peerless ominous sword. Most people didn't have a real concept of his true strength. At this time, Yi Shiwen did not make any movements. He simply blasted out a punch. Under the fist energy, a huge vortex was formed. The vortex transformed into a world with lands, skies, oceans, and even living creatures. It was a world of terrifying technique. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Gu Shiying was, after all, very knowledgeable. With just a glance, she instantly recognized the origin of this terrifying fist technique. It was the human Tao fist of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. However, it seemed to be different from the human Tao fist that he knew. The six paths of reincarnation fist was widespread, but even those with heaven-defying luck could only obtain one fist technique. That was why he had seen it before. However, it seemed to be different from the human Tao fist that he had seen last time. It could even be said that it had reached a whole new realm. Not only the world of human Tao, it seemed to be evolving into a completely new world. This was the result of Yi Shiwen's comprehension of heaven's way reaching a whole new realm after condensing the divine kingdom. This directly reflected in his various martial arts cultivation. Compared to the previous human Tao fist, the current human Tao fist was even more dreadful. The previous human Tao fist could only evolve the civilization of the human race, but the current human Tao fist could evolve a unique civilization that belonged to the entire world. Bang! Yi Shiwen's human Tao fist bombarded on Yin Bai's scholar's sword, and an astonishing burst of light suddenly erupted. Yin Bai screamed and retreated on the spot. A crack appeared on his right hand that was holding the sword, and blood splashed out from it. Dang, dang, dang. Yin Bai retreated a few steps before he barely stabilized his body. There was a look of disbelief on his face. It seemed to be completely beyond his expectations. What kind of monster are you? How can you have such great strength? His right hand was trembling violently. He didn't even realize that blood was dripping down because his entire arm was completely numb. So he couldn't feel the pain of his arm being broken and blood splashing. The gap between the two sides had already become so big in just one exchange. This made Yin Bai's expression a bit difficult to accept. He had always thought that Yi Shiwen was just this or so. The so-called title of the strongest person in the contemporary era was just a joke that everyone flattered him for fun. He couldn't take it seriously at all. Now, it seemed that he was still too naive. Although many people were indeed not as good as their reputation, Yi Shiwen in front of him was 10 times or even 100 times more terrifying than the rumors. It was the first time in his life that he had encountered someone who had crippled his entire arm with just one punch. In the past, he didn't even put those aloof senior brothers in his eyes. It was just that he had cultivated for a few years earlier. But now, he couldn't use such an excuse to comfort himself, because Yi Shiwen's cultivation time was even shorter than his. One punch, just one punch? Is he really so strong? He really lives up to his reputation. I'm afraid he's not far from being the strongest person in the contemporary era. Many Confucian disciples couldn't help but say. They were somewhat stunned. In the hearts of these people, Yin Bai wasn't much worse than Gu Shuriying. He was also ranked at the top in the contemporary era. They simply couldn't imagine that someone could actually cripple Yin Bai with just one punch. Do you want to continue the competition? Yi Shiwen withdrew his fist and the momentum of his body. He instantly became calm again and just looked at Yin Bai indifferently. Brother Ye's cultivation is superb. Junior Yin is no match for you. This competition doesn't need to continue, Gu Shuriying said. He could already see that Yin Bai was completely no match for Yi Shiwen. If the competition continued like this, the face of the Confucian sect would be completely lost. No, I haven't completely lost yet. Yi Shiwen, as long as you take one more move from me, then I will admit defeat. I will admit that you are indeed unparalleled in the contemporary era. Yin Bai gritted his teeth and looked at Yi Shiwen. His eyes were burning with unyielding fighting spirit. Gu Shuriying looked at Yin Bai awkwardly. He knew very well how stubborn this hot-tempered junior Yin was. He never admitted defeat. It was imaginable how shocking this punch was for him to admit that he was the strongest person in the contemporary era. It was far more than what he showed on the surface. Well, no matter what kind of move you have, I will take it, Yi Shiwen said indifferently. He was confident and naturally wasn't afraid of any changes. Good. You are a real man. Yin Bai's eyes were a bit more appreciative. He hated those guys who did things without doing anything. At this time, there seemed to be spiritual power burning on Yin Bai's body. It instantly turned into endless righteousness. With him as the center, it instantly swept out, forming a huge tornado and storm. Boundless righteousness was gathering on his body, which then transformed into an illusory figure that wrapped around him. This incomparably huge figure became clearer and clearer. It turned out to be a Confucian. His face couldn't be seen clearly, but it was not the phantom of a person. It was the manifestation of the thoughts of hundreds of millions of disciples of the Confucian sect over the countless years. It seemed that as soon as it appeared, it formed a terrifying momentum that crushed down on Yi Shiwen's body. Boom! Yi Shiwen's brows slightly wrinkled, and his clothes were fluttering in the wind, constantly trembling under the scouring of this terrifying righteousness. Yi Shiwen, watch carefully. Although I am not as good as you, it is not that the martial arts of the Confucian sect are not broad and profound enough. It is just that I am not proficient in it. This move is called the righteous sword. It is the supreme technique that I have comprehended. Yan Bai's voice was full of majesty. At this moment, he was not fighting alone. He was the incarnation of the thoughts of countless Confucian disciples. A sword appeared in his hand. It shone brightly and bloomed with millions of scattered lights, forming a powerful storm. Boom! All of a sudden, the sword in the hand of that phantom suddenly chopped down. The dreadful sword light washed away the sky dome. It tore a crack in the sky and spread towards Yi Shiwen. This sword had the momentum to devour the stars. Wind and clouds rose, and there was a kind of indestructible majesty that seemed to transcend the world and the universe. He had no choice but to get serious. Countless streams of Sovereign Lord's sword will erupted from him, a consummate technique of the Tao of the sword that he had cultivated. In the blink of an eye, an enormous illusory image appeared behind him, the image of a sovereign Lord Emperor. Although he was only one person, he was strong enough to hold his own against the illusory image of countless Confucian disciples. A terrifying sword intent condensed in his hand, and countless laws twisted around it like ribbons. They rotated constantly, bringing with them a terrifying force. Yi Shiwen's sovereign sword took shape as he watched the giant sword slash down towards him. Boom! The loud collision completely woke everyone up from their shock. Even the craziest person would not have thought that there would be such an intense collision. So scary. Many people retreated, not daring to get close. They quickly set up barriers in front of themselves. The two sides were locked in a stalemate. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen's sovereign sword intense increased in power. Bang! That mighty sword actually shattered with a loud bang. Chapter 2558. After the entire awe-inspiring righteousness was instantly shattered, it was disintegrating at an even more astonishing speed. Almost in an instant, it completely collapsed. Yi Shiwen's Dominator sword's momentum did not decrease. After breaking all the defenses on Yan Bai's body, he suddenly stopped and stopped. Yan Bai's back was completely soaked. His eyes were full of horror. Although he had long been prepared, when the moment really came, he still found that he was not as unafraid of death as he thought. The gap between him and Yi Shiwen had reached an unimaginable level. At least, it was much bigger than he thought. For Gu Shiying, what really surprised him was Yi Shiwen's control of power. It had completely reached the level of retracting and releasing it freely. This move could directly defeat Yan Bai's Confucian Tao incarnation. Needless to say, the power was great, but he could completely restrain it at the slightest distance. This was even more terrifying than his explosive attack power. It had reached an incredible level. More importantly, he had just condensed the divine kingdom, and his future achievements were limitless. He even had the urge to cut his body into pieces and study it. They were both humans, but why was the gap so big? After all, the Confucian sect was developed by the human race. Although there were many Confucian masters of various races who were deeply influenced by the Confucian sect, most of them were still based on the human race. This was one of the fundamental reasons why Yi Shiwen could reach an agreement with Gu Shiying. At this time, people of the same race would naturally be closer than others. Thank you, Brother Yi, for showing mercy. Yan Bai cupped his hands and said. After escaping from Yi Shiwen's hands, he did not continue to attack. After all, he was only dissatisfied with Yi Shiwen's title. Now that Yi Shiwen had shown strength far beyond his, although he did not know if he was already the strongest in the world, there was no doubt that he was above him. Moreover, he was a straightforward person. Although he was a little hot-tempered, he was not someone who did not know what was good for him. Gu Shiren could not help but sigh in relief when he saw that the two stopped while they were ahead. If the two continued to fight, it would make it very difficult for him, who was sandwiched between the two. You don't need to fight to the death in an ordinary fight. Yi Shiwen smiled and didn't say anything. In fact, he was also using Yanbai as a sharpening stone. Yanbai's strength could be said to be first-rate among the current generation of experts. Although there was still a gap between him and Gu Shiren, but he had steadily entered the ranks of the first-rate. Thus, he roughly knew the strength of the current generation of experts. They were just taking what they needed. If that's the case, then let's not waste any more time. Let's hurry up and enter. Although we've already predicted that the spring and autumn brush will appear in this place, we still need to find it. That will take time. Gu Shiren made a decision. Brother Gu, I have one more thing to discuss with you, Yi Shiwen said. Gu Shiren made an inviting gesture and said, Brother Yi, please speak. I hope that we can separate for the time being. You are looking for the spring and autumn brush, and I also have something that I need to look for. Before you find the spring and autumn brush, I won't get involved. However, if you find the spring and autumn brush, inform me immediately, and I will rush over as soon as possible, Yi Shiwen said. Gu Shiren's brows slightly wrinkled. Yi Shiwen had displayed an amazing strength a moment ago, and this had made him even more eager to borrow Yi Shiwen's strength. However, since Yi Shiwen had already made this request, he couldn't be unreasonable. That's not a problem. When the time comes, Brother Yi can go by yourself. However, if we find the whereabouts of the spring and autumn brush, I hope that Brother Yi can come over as soon as possible. Of course, Yi Shiwen said. Everyone didn't hesitate and hurriedly headed toward the secret territory. From afar, they could see a huge crack appearing in the void. It looked incomparably ferocious, as if it was going to swallow everything. In the sky, there were constantly flashing divine lights flying into the crack. Obviously, it had been open for some time. The Kurfürst Road had been open for so many years, and these gods were already familiar with it. Everyone followed suit and rushed in. As soon as they entered, they were still in the periphery area. Yi Shiwen and the people of the Confucian sect hadn't separated yet. After a while, they could clearly see endless dark clouds gathering in front of them. Demonic aura soared into the sky. From afar, they could see the sky full of demonic aura spreading. Gu Shiren stopped and said, Everyone be careful. The Kurfürst Road was already full of danger, but the secret territory in the Kurfürst Road was even more dangerous than the outside. It was just a common thing for gods to die in there. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes of redemption and saw that in the dark clouds that were spreading with demonic aura, there were countless demon soldiers and demon generals gathering. They weren't normal dark clouds. These demons were endless, and each of them was hundreds of meters tall. At a glance, they looked like pillars supporting the sky. They were extremely powerful and terrifying. These demons weren't gods, but the aura they emitted was comparable to that of gods. In fact, it was even superior to that of many gods. What was going on? Why did it feel like they weren't ordinary demon race experts, but killing machines? Even Yi Shiwen could see the ferocious expressions on their faces. This was a bit strange, and it piqued Yi Shiwen's interest. Another group of people is coming. Kill them. Kill. 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 These demons seemed to have discovered the existence of Yi Shiwen and the others. Humph! Gu Shiren frowned. These evildoers actually dare to have designs on us. They're really courting death. Although his main goal was to find the spring and autumn brush, he couldn't allow these evil creatures to act so presumptuously. In just a short while, tens of thousands of demons separated from the army and flew towards Yi Shiwen and the others. Let me! Yanbai took a step forward and shouted, Ha! This was an extremely profound magical power of the Confucian sect. Combined with his righteous aura, it was the greatest nemesis of these evildoers. The hundreds of demons running in front exploded in the air, turning into a bloody rain. Then, a brush appeared in Yanbai's hand, and the bloody rain was immediately absorbed by the brush, making it shine even brighter. This was also the spring and autumn brush. In fact, the magic tools that the experts of the Confucian sect practiced were in the direction of the four treasures of the study. Among them, many people practiced the spring and autumn brush at the same time. Although very few could reach the true power of the spring and autumn brush, it was still quite extraordinary. At this time, the disciples of the Confucian sect also attacked. These people were the elites of the current generation of disciples of the Confucian sect. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to come to the Kerfus Road to train. Although they were far inferior to Yi Shiwen, they were still far superior to ordinary gods. They were the cream of the crop that the Confucian sect had cultivated for the past 100,000 years. The moment they attacked, the sky was filled with righteous aura. The demonic aura was no match for the righteous aura, and they were forced to retreat. Under the attack of these disciples of the Confucian sect, thousands of demons were forced to retreat. Then, Gu Shiring joined the battle. His Dharma artifact was also the spring and autumn brush. He wrote the word explode in the air, causing the demons to self-destruct on the spot. It was as though they had been ravaged by some nomological power. Soon, Yi Shiwen also joined the battle. Compared to these disciples of the Confucian sect, Yi Shiwen's method was more ferocious. He held the Tianyuan mirror in his hand and shot out a bloody light. Hundreds of demons evaporated in the light and turned into bloody light, which was then absorbed by the Tianyuan mirror. Although these demons weren't gods, their vitality was vigorous, and it was no less than that of a god. They were all swallowed by the Tianyuan mirror. He could also feel that the Tianyuan mirror was getting stronger and stronger. In the outside world, under ordinary circumstances, there wouldn't be so many gods for him to kill. Now, the Tianyuan mirror was already a high-grade divine tool. However, it was still a huge project to restore it to the level of a top-grade divine tool. For the past thousands of years, Yi Shiwen had been working hard to restore the Tianyuan mirror, but he had only completed less than half of it. However, killing these demons could greatly increase the speed at which Yi Shiwen restored the Tianyuan mirror. He couldn't help but be excited. As more and more demons were killed, the bloody light on the Tianyuan mirror became more and more intense. This made Gu Shiring very surprised. He could feel that the spring and autumn brush in his hand was completely suppressed by the Tianyuan mirror. That kind of terrifying aura was like that of a true king of the world. It seemed as if it would suppress all directions as soon as it appeared. This wasn't because of the disparity in power between him and Yi Shiwen. Instead, there was a subtle disparity in the quality of their divine tools. Both were clearly high-grade divine tools. However, Yi Shiwen's Tianyuan mirror had a kind of king's aura that could crush all directions. This was something that his spring and autumn brush didn't possess. In fact, he hadn't seen some of this aura from the Confucian sect's four treasures of the study. This aura was superior to countless divine tools. Although it seemed that Yi Shiwen's power had yet to reach the level of crushing all directions, his aura had already been revealed. What made him even more speechless was that Yi Shiwen's speed in killing these demons was simply abnormal. Their Confucian sect cultivated the awe-inspiring righteousness, which happened to restrain these gloomy demon auras. However, even with so many of them, they still couldn't catch up with Yi Shiwen's killing speed. They were already rushing to catch up, but compared to Yi Shiwen's speed, they were still very slow. The bloody aura that filled the sky had sealed all the demons and then killed them. It was too terrifying. Just now, no one had really seen Yi Shiwen use a divine tool. Just his body alone was already very strong, let alone a divine tool. After a while, these separated monsters were already blown up by Yi Shiwen and were completely wiped out. However, compared to the endless number of demons, this was just a drop in the ocean. In the face of such a huge group of demons, Gu Shiring didn't want to look for trouble. However, he immediately saw Yi Shiwen holding the Tianyuan mirror in his hand and rushing to kill. He was completely speechless. Chapter 2559. All the disciples of the Confucian sect were speechless when they saw this. Wasn't this a little too king perverted? Even the gods did not truly have boundless magic power. There were times when they reached their limits. It was impossible for them to truly have endless magic power. It might not be obvious in normal battles, but in the face of such a large army of monsters, it would take them a lot of energy to kill all of them, let alone the fact that many of them were stronger than ordinary gods. Even if there were so many pigs, it would take them a lot of energy to kill them all. If they fell into the hands of these monsters, even if they were the elites of the Confucian sect, they would still be completely annihilated. Only those who had reached the level of monstrous geniuses would be able to carve out a bloody path. They were still aware of this point. If it was someone else, they would definitely think that this person was crazy or that he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, in the face of Yi Shiwen's abnormal strength, they could not say such words. In any case, Yi Shiwen did not look like he had gone crazy. Perhaps he was confident. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen held the Tianyuan mirror and used it to directly open a path. Except for a portion of the monsters that were digested by the Tianyuan mirror, the rest were all transformed into energy by the Tianyuan mirror. Yi Shiwen did not even need to activate it himself. The Tianyuan mirror was invincible. The only thing he needed to worry about was whether there were tyrannical existences among these monsters. If there were only these small fries, Yi Shiwen would kill as many as there were. The only difference was that it would take a little more time. Although Yi Shiwen was not afraid, he did not go too deep. He did not want to be trapped in there and die. Although his strength was far superior to these monsters, there was still a possibility that there would be tyrannical existences among these monsters. However, if there were too many of them, it was possible that he would be crushed to death by them. As he killed more and more monsters, more and more of these monsters rushed towards him. Soon a gap was created. He could clearly see that there was a group of people in the middle of the monster horde. At this time, even the people of the Confucian sect had discovered these people in the middle of the monster horde. Who are they? Why are we trapped here? Yan Bai said in a somewhat strange tone. Anyone who encountered such a huge monster horde would turn and flee. How could they be trapped? That is the current sect leader of the Divine Puppet sect. I recognize him. Gu Shiring suddenly recognized one of them. The Divine Puppet sect has really declined. They were such a powerful sect in the past, but now their sect leader's cultivation is just SSO. Of course, he was qualified to say something like that. Even the current leader of the powerful Divine Puppet cult had to enter the Kurfürst Road to explore in person. They did not even have a Regis, and they had long fallen from the ranks of the Regis. It's not just the Divine Puppet sect, there are also those from the Battle Saint clan. Isn't that Zhang Yin? You usually let him be arrogant, but now he's trapped in it. Golden light burst out from Yan Bai's eyes. It was obvious that he was also opening his inner eye to check the situation inside. Very quickly, he discovered that not only were there people from the Battle Saint clan and the Divine Puppet sect, there were also a few elite disciples from first-rate sections. What a pity. They're all going to perish in there. Gu Shiring sighed and said, although that Zhang Yin is a little evil, his strength is indeed not bad. It's really a pity that he's going to perish here. The people from the Confucian sect felt that it was a pity that no one went forward to help. What a joke. Thinking about the endless number of demons, their scalps tingled a little. If they rushed in, it wouldn't take long for them to be swallowed alive. Although Yi Shiwen was slaughtering, he had been paying attention to the situation at the entrance. When he heard the words Divine Puppet Sect, his heart suddenly moved. Originally, he did not intend to meddle in these matters, but if the other party was the Divine Puppet Sect, then it was different. Speaking of which, he still owed the Divine Puppet Sect a big favor. It was needless to say how precious Zhao Tianquan's two puppets were. Vengeance for vengeance, kindness for kindness, that was his principle. Brother Yi, quickly retreat. Wait for these demons to slaughter all these people. Then they will target us. Gu Shiring transmitted her voice. I have to take care of this matter. I owe a debt of gratitude to an elder of the Divine Puppet Sect. I can ignore the others, but I must save the people from the Divine Puppet Sect. Yi Shiwen said calmly. Kill! He shouted, and immediately a sharp sword appeared in his hand. Sword light sprayed out, transforming into sword inscriptions. Countless laws of the Tao of the sword transformed into talismans that shot out in all directions. Hundreds of demon beasts were annihilated by him on the spot. and then absorbed by the Tianyuan mirror. At the same time, the Tianyuan mirror did not stop, constantly sprinkling blood-red light. And at the same time, a light curtain hung down, covering Yi Shiwen, so that the demons could not approach. Gradually, the Tianyuan mirror absorbed more and more flesh and blood, becoming stronger and stronger. Although they were not real gods, such a large number was enough to make up for the lack of quality. On the Tianyuan mirror, a blood-red chapter was being written. Although most of the power was used to suppress the Avicii's sword, the remaining power was used to promote more destructive changes. There seemed to be a faint sacred voice chanting the divine text of the ancient gods from countless years ago. Sacred and powerful. This bloody chapter was constantly being written, and it was becoming more and more powerful. It was undergoing an unprecedented transformation, and Yi Shiwen had never seen such a transformation before. However, Yimo wasn't here at this time, so there was no one to consult. However, after thinking about it, this should not be a bad thing, so he did not care about it for the time being. As he continued to slaughter these demons, the people from the Divine Puppet Sect and the Battle Sage clan were approaching. With every step he took, hundreds of demons died in his hands. They could not stop the killing of his sword aura. At this moment, he, who had the ruler's sword aura, seemed to have transformed into an invincible emperor, cutting through all the obstacles and giving off the aura of ruling the world. In the distance, Gu Shiying was dumbfounded. With his strength, if he were to enter the horde of demons, he would be completely devoured in no time. However, not only did Yi Shiwen not listen to his advice, he even re-entered the horde to save the people of the Divine Puppet Sect. Cutting through all the obstacles, he was simply invincible. The endless number of demons could not do anything to Yi Shiwen at all. However, at this moment, the faces of the disciples of the Confucian sect revealed a look of admiration. The teachings of the Confucian sect emphasized on sacrificing one's life for righteousness, to repay kindness with kindness, and to repay grievances with justice. Regardless of whether it was the Divine Puppet Sect or the Battle Sage clan, they did not have a deep relationship with them. If their friends fell into the crowd, they would not sit idly by. At this moment, under the attack of countless demons, many experts from the Battle Sage clan and the other sects were already struggling to resist. These people were divided according to the different sects, and they did not stand together. However, at the same time, they joined forces and formed a huge formation to resist these demons. Among the many experts from the Battle Sage clan, there was a young man with a handsome face. He stood in the middle of the formation, fearless and elegant. However, from time to time, he would attack and kill all the demons that rushed in. However, he only protected the experts from the Battle Sage clan and even secretly lured the demons to slaughter the people from the other forces. However, even with such experts from the Battle Sage clan, under the attack of these demons, they were somewhat powerless and could not hold on for much longer. Senior Zhang Yin, if this goes on, our formation will definitely be broken. Once it is broken, we will die without a burial ground. What should we do then? Someone beside him could not help but frown and say. Although the formation was not worrisome for the time being, they could not break out. If this continued, they would die in the hands of these demons sooner or later. Even a deity could not remain calm at the thought of death. What's there to worry about? It's not time yet. Zhang Yan's expression did not change at all as he said, I lured these people into the demon horde to attract their attention. Otherwise, with just a few of us, even if all of us died, we would not be able to reach the core of the demon horde. However, even if Senior Zhang Yan's plan succeeds, and we successfully obtain the weapon spirit of the demon beckoning banner, how are we going to leave? Someone asked in confusion. What's there to be afraid of? I have already prepared. I have a teleportation talisman, personally made by a titled expert. In the end, I will naturally be able to bring you all out of here, Zhang Yin said calmly. It turned out that all of this was just his plan. He had long predicted that the weapon spirit of the demon beckoning banner would be here. Now was the crucial time for the weapon spirit of the demon beckoning banner to transform. If he could launch a surprise attack at this time, then there was a high chance that he would be able to capture the weapon spirit of the demon beckoning banner. His heart was incomparably excited at the thought of being able to capture the once world-famous demon clan's weapon spirit alive. Although the demon beckoning banner had been completely destroyed after the Great Battle, and even a part of the weapon spirit had escaped, this was enough. This was the artifact spirit of a Tao artifact. Many people had never even heard of it, let alone seen it. He had only found out about the whereabouts of the artifact spirit of the demon summoning banner by chance, and came up with this plan. When I devour the weapon spirit of the demon beckoning banner and refine the various inheritances within it, becoming a titled expert will be just around the corner. Then I will snatch the spring and autumn brush. When that time comes, those demons will be nothing. The opportunity to become an emperor will be mine, and no one will be able to snatch it away. Zhang Yin thought to himself coldly. If his plan succeeded, his future would really be bright. However, at this moment his eyebrows twitched. He had actually discovered that the originally established trajectory seemed to have suddenly become blurry. The heavenly secrets were blurred. All he heard was a series of exclamations. Who is that? Why has he killed his way in? Chapter 2560. Who is that person? Why did he kill his way in? Suddenly, someone exclaimed. Zhang Yin raised his head and looked over, only to see a silhouette killing its way in. This silhouette brought with it a boundless aura as it swept through the area. Those demons were killed like they were made of paper. They were not a match for this person at all. Who is this person? Zhang Yan's eyes flashed with endless murderous intent. He suddenly felt that his future was uncertain. It seemed to be because of this person's arrival. And at this moment, it seemed that Yi Shiwen's unscrupulous killing had completely enraged them. Among the monsters, a demon king rushed out. It was a violent ape that was thousands of feet tall. Its strength was obviously a lot stronger than the other monsters, and the iron stick in its hand chopped down towards Yi Shiwen. It was a rod that could tear the heavens and the earth. Endless demonic auras surged, as if they had returned to the heyday of the ancient demon heavenly court. Boom! In everyone's eyes, Yi Shiwen was about to be blasted to death. But they saw him raise his hand and catch this terrifying instrument that was formed from endless demonic aura with his bare hands. Buzz! The powerful forces of both sides were still colliding, and there was a burst of buzzing sounds. Then, the iron rod suddenly trembled, and then cracks appeared on the entire rod. In an instant, it turned into a sky full of black, demonic aura that filled the air. Then, before everyone could react, a blood-red beam of light descended from the sky. Like a sharp sword, it directly pierced through the chest of the violent ape. A huge bloody hole appeared on the body of the violent ape. Blood spurted out, and endless bloody light overflowed. The violent ape was dumbfounded. It seemed to have never thought that it would be so vulnerable, and that it would be seriously injured in just one blow. Roar! The violent ape roared angrily. It healed the wounds on its body and pounced towards Yi Shiwen again. Who is this person? The people who were surrounded all widened their eyes, as if they wanted to recognize the person who had come. That violent ape had yet to make a move, but even so, it had already taken up a large amount of their energy. Even Zhang Yin had no choice but to use most of his energy to monitor that violent ape. Now, there was actually someone who could heavily injure that violent ape. Just who was this person? Yi Shiwen immediately unleashed his Dharma idol, which was thousands of feet tall. He clashed with the violent ape, and the terrifying collision set off a violent tide in the space, which fluctuated unceasingly. The demons that were affected screamed as they were blasted to smithereens. Where did this person come from? How can he be so strong? Is he already a genius at the peak of the sage plane? Everyone was shocked. They even saw that this extremely terrifying violent ape had been beaten by Yi Shiwen, and had been forced to retreat again and again. In fact, it couldn't even stand steadily. Die! This violent ape growled in a low voice. It once again grabbed an iron rod. Its whole body was burning with monstrous chi. All the strength of its body was concentrated together. It wanted to give Yi Shiwen the final blow. You're courting death. The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth twitched. He opened his palm, and countless sword auras condensed, forming a giant sword. A world of swordsmanship was formed instantly, appearing in mid-air. This evolved world had an indescribable and terrifying power. All the monstrous chi could not resist Yi Shiwen's sword aura at all, and it collapsed one after another. Yi Shiwen's sword momentum did not decrease, and he did not stop at all. The sword aura ruthlessly slashed the violent ape's body. Boom! The violent ape was hit by the sword aura, and its monstrous chi completely collapsed. Under the terrifying sword aura, its physical body crumbled inch by inch. Boom! The violent ape was killed, and it turned into a sky full of blood rain that was absorbed by the Tianyuan mirror. The Tianyuan mirror absorbed this blood rain and directly turned into a beam of blood light that shot up into the sky. Who is this person? How can he be so powerful? The divine puppet sect leader looked at this scene and could not help but be extremely shocked. He had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years, and it could be said that he was the strongest genius in the divine puppet sect after the Great Change. After so many years, if it was someone who had become famous in the past, he should have some understanding of it. If it was someone he did not know, it could only be someone of the current generation. After killing the violent ape, the demon beasts stopped their attacks. Yi Shiwen took advantage of this opportunity to appear in front of the divine puppet sect's sect master. "Are you from the divine puppet sect?" Yi Shiwen asked. "That's right. May I know who you are?" The divine puppet sect leader asked. "My name is Yi Shiwen," Yi Shiwen said. "Yi Shiwen? You are Yi Shiwen?" The divine puppet sect leader was a little stunned. He also had an impression of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen, who had been a legend for hundreds of years, was quite well known even among these older generation figures. Although they did not know what Yi Shiwen looked like, this did not prevent him from knowing Yi Shiwen. What? He's Yi Shiwen? Someone in this generation has already reached such a level? Someone exclaimed. Their divine puppet sect had been in decline for a long time, and it had been many years since any particularly outstanding figure had appeared. As a result, they did not particularly care about this matter. Every time they cared, it could only be said that they were asking for trouble, and it would only increase their suspicions. Yi Shiwen. Zhang Yan's eyes instantly lit up. Similarly, he was an outstanding figure in this generation. How could he not know this figure who had been set as a benchmark? After hundreds of years, he had heard this name so many times that he had grown calluses. Thank you for saving us. The divine puppet sect will definitely repay you generously in the future. The divine puppet sect leader said gratefully. There's no need for that. I once owed a senior of your divine puppet sect a favor. Now, I'm just returning his favor. Yi Shiwen waved his hand and said, it was not a big deal. Isn't it a little too early to thank him now? It's still uncertain whether he can save us or not. At this moment, an ice-cold voice came from afar. It was an expert from the Battle Sage clan. When he saw this scene, he could not help but speak sarcastically. What do you mean by that? If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have fallen into this predicament. Now that someone has come to help us, you still dare to make such sarcastic remarks. A divine puppet sect expert said angrily. Although the divine puppet sect could no longer be compared to a powerful regal sect like the Battle Sage clan, the divine puppet sect did not submit blindly. They had already reached the end of their patience. If it wasn't for them, they would not have fallen into such a dangerous situation, especially since these people were already more than half of the divine puppet sect's elites. If they were all wiped out, it would really be one disaster after another for the already declining divine puppet sect. Now, the words of the Battle Sage clan had completely angered them. Chapter 2561. Originally, these people had a belly full of anger, but they could not let it out in front of the enemy. In addition, the Battle Saint family had a king realm old ancestor. They were powerful, so they could not be bothered. But now, they could not hold it in any longer and were furious. The people from the Battle Saint clans were speechless because they couldn't retort at this moment. On the contrary, they couldn't possibly say that all of this was the result of their calculations, right? If they really said that, it would probably cause the people from the Battle Saint clans to retaliate. Those who could enter the Kurfürst Road were not simple people. Although they were afraid of the Battle Saint family, if their lives were in danger, how could they care so much? The people from the other forces also followed behind the divine puppet sect, subtly standing together. After all, the Battle Saint family had gathered them together, but in the end, they were trapped in a dangerous situation. They could not help but be angry. However, the people from the Battle Saint family could not retreat. Both sides were in a stalemate. Other than dealing with the endless attacks of the demon army, they were basically focused on each other. And all of this was brought about by Yi Shiwen. Although they had some animosity, they could still focus on fighting against the demon army. How can you say that? Many experts from the Battle Saint family were furious. Shouldn't we be speaking the way we speak? You guys are quite capable to have actually brought us here. Finally, someone from the divine puppet sect couldn't help but say sarcastically, "Stop arguing. We are now in the tiger's den. Have you all forgotten?" Someone also tried to stand up and be the peacemaker, trying to smooth things over. Yi Shiwen looked at both sides. He could feel the eyes of the people from the Battle Saint family looking at him, full of hatred and anger. However, he had no intention of getting involved. He only said to the divine puppet sect leader, "I owe a great favor to the elders of your sect. Now, I will be responsible for bringing you all out. Follow me closely. Don't get lost." Everyone was stunned. Yi Shiwen actually planned to rush out and kill his way out. If I said this person is crazy, we are now in the center of the demon army. Does he think he can kill his way out just like that? If he could, wouldn't we have already killed our way out? The expert from the Battle Saint family said sarcastically. Indeed, killing one's way in and killing one's way out were two completely different concepts. The difficulty had also increased by several folds. Zhang Yan's gaze was also firmly fixed on Yi Shiwen. He did not know if Yi Shiwen was truly confident or if he was just bragging. However, regardless of whether it was true or not, Yi Shiwen's appearance had already disrupted their deployment. Without these people supporting them, it would not be long before they were devoured by this demon army. It was also possible that the entire army would be wiped out. Yi Shiwen ignored them and said to the sovereign of the divine puppet sect, "If you believe me, then follow me. I won't joke around with my life." The sovereign of the divine bat sect had some doubts at first. However, after thinking about it, he realized that Yi Shiwen had killed his way in from the outside to save them. He might have been a bit reckless, but his tyrannical strength was obvious to all. So, he wouldn't believe that such a person was a fool. It was just that they didn't know what kind of tricks he had up his sleeves. More importantly, if they stayed here, they would die of exhaustion sooner or later. Since they were going to die sooner or later, why not give it a try? Thinking of this, he had already made a decision. He nodded and said, "All right, then we'll follow you. Bring one of us along. Bring us along. We've had enough of this." At this moment, many people from the other forces also spoke up. No one wanted to stay here and wait for death. Since they were going to die anyway, they might as well go all out. In their surroundings, the endless howls of the demons lingered in their ears. This made them even more determined. In just a short while, a few more people had been devoured by the demon army. This made them even more afraid to stay any longer. "If you want to follow me, then go." Yi Shiwen nodded. Since he was going to bring people along, it did not matter if there were more. "No, you can't leave," Zhang Yin blurted out. Then, he immediately realized that he had made a slip of the tongue. Sure enough, everyone was glaring at him. Their eyes were filled with suspicion. These people were all deities, and they were all experienced figures. They had not thought about it before, but now that they thought about it, they realized that there were too many strange things about the Battle Saint family, especially the matter of them being mysteriously trapped in the demon army. No matter how they looked at it, it was a little strange. After all, with such a large demon army, as long as one was not stupid, it was impossible for them to run into it. With their strength, even if they were not a match for the demon army, it would still be very easy for them to escape. "Zhang Yin, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to stop us?" The sect leader of the Divine Cloth sect instantly changed his expression. In his opinion, the Battle Saint family was simply going too far. That's not what I mean. It's just that this person's origin is unknown, and his goal is also unknown. Do you really believe that he can help you escape? Zhang Yin immediately thought of a self-justifying explanation. Even if we might die, it's better than staying here. If we stay here, we will definitely die. The sect master of the divine puppet sect said, "This matter is very strange. Although your Battle Saint clan is powerful, I don't think it's powerful enough to fool so many of us. You better not let me find out what you're planning. Otherwise, we won't let this matter rest." At this moment, everyone had a worried look on their faces. The sect leader of the Divine Cloth sect had said what they were thinking. Their own family could not afford to offend the Battle Saint family, but with so many families working together, even the Battle Saint family would have to think twice. In particular, the Divine Puppet sect was originally a powerful regal sect. How could they not have any trump cards now? If they were really forced to the point of mutual destruction, no one would benefit. What is the meaning of the Divine Puppet sect? We gathered all of you because we wanted to take care of each other. No one wanted something like this to happen, Zhang Yin suddenly said with a sullen face. His mind started to work. Now that they had made up their minds, he could not stop them. Unless they wanted to start a fight, he could only let them leave. However, if there was an abnormality, why would he waste so much effort to plot against them? He could only let those demons take advantage of him and ruin his plan. He could only try his best to delay for time. He stared at Yi Shiwen. It was all because of this person. It was this person's appearance that ruined his plan and made all his previous plans go to waste. If not for this critical moment, he would have immediately killed them. When had he ever suffered such a loss? His heart was extremely cold. Let's see how you will escape when the time comes. What is there to say to him? Let's go. Don't delay for time. Yi Shiwen seemed to see through his plan to delay for time and directly cut off his thoughts. Although Yi Shiwen did not know what Zhang Yin wanted to do, he could clearly feel that he wanted to delay for time. Naturally, he could not let Zhang Yin succeed. Yes, that's right. Let's go. Ignore them. At this moment, everyone was united and wanted to live. They were unprecedentedly united. Crash! A shocking bloody light appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand. It cut through the air, and hundreds of demons evaporated in the air. Yi Shiwen's figure had already rushed out. Everyone hurriedly followed, not daring to stay for even a moment. A vast team, like a sharp sword, directly rushed out and stabbed directly into the group of demons. In an instant, a big hole was opened. For a moment, the demons were at a loss. It seemed that they had never thought that these people would suddenly change their strategy and rush out. But soon, a large part of the demon group directly dived down and pounced towards Yi Shiwen and the others. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen rushed forward and swept the Tianyuan mirror in his hand. Moreover, the bloody light hung down to protect these people. Soon, a small half of the demon group was penetrated. These people were instantly overjoyed. They saw the hope of survival. One by one, they attacked with all their might. They used their hidden trump cards one after another. This also allowed them to advance a little faster. As for the people from the Battle Sage clan, they saw that they were getting further and further away. They had never thought that Yi Shiwen's penetrating power would be so strong. He was opening a path in front of them alone. There was no one who could resist him at all. He forcefully opened a path and swept away all the demons. Otherwise, with the strength of the people from the Divine Puppet sect, it was impossible for them to escape. They would have been completely intercepted before they could even advance half the distance. What should we do? Senior Zhang Yin, if this continues, they will escape. We can't hold on for much longer. These people from the Battle Sage clan could not help but complain. They looked at Zhang Yin. All of this was because of Zhang Yin's plan. Zhang Yin was also their spiritual leader. Want to leave? They can't leave. Zhang Yin said coldly. With a flip of his palm, a flag appeared in his hand. The flag was engraved with countless ancient runes. In the center of the flag, there was an ancient seal character, Yao. He waved this flag in his hand. In an instant, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Countless forces soared into the sky. An astonishing demonic aura swept out and pierced through the void. It directly swept towards Yi Shiwen's head, who was about to disappear from their sight. This terrifying force broke through the sky and smashed down. In an instant, the sky changed color. Chapter 2562. In an instant, this majestic force tore through the void and landed heavily on Yi Shiwen's body. At this critical moment, a pair of wings suddenly sprouted from Yi Shiwen's body. His body shifted thousands of meters away, barely dodging this majestic force. This force swept across, and countless demons died tragically. A few divine puppet sect experts who were following closely behind Yi Shiwen but could not dodge in time were instantly turned into a mist of blood. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The power of this move was terrifying, but the divine puppet sect leader's face was ashen. Zhang Yin, your battle saint family, and I will not rest. He had already recognized this move. It was Zhang Yan's instrument. He had used it once before to deal with the Demon King, but now he was using it on them. After being reminded by the leader of the divine puppet sect, everyone started to think about it, and their expressions changed instantly. They were going to be trapped here until they died. How vicious! Damn it, we shouldn't have trusted these sons of asterisk cheese. Bastards, once I get out, I will not rest until they are dead. We must let them know that even we have anger. These people started cursing. Yi Shiwen finally understood that Zhang Yin had made a move. He actually had such a trump card. The attack just now was extremely powerful. If he had not dodged it, he would have been seriously injured. Even a toddler knew what would happen if he was seriously injured here. Everyone also figured it out. He didn't come for everyone, but directly for Yi Shiwen. He knew that they had to rely on Yi Shiwen's breakthrough power to break out of here. How sinister! A murderous intent flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes. His gaze was incomparably cold. This Zhang Yin had made him want to kill him. What battle saint family? What did they think they were? But he did not completely lose his mind. He said, our priority now is to rush out. Ignore him for now. He can't keep attacking like this. Wait until we get out. Then we will slowly settle the score with him. That's right, Brother Yi is right. Let's get out first. Zhang Yan's move needs a long time to prepare. Every time he uses it, it consumes a lot of spiritual power. I've seen it before. Everyone, don't worry. The sect master of the divine puppet sect stepped forward and comforted everyone when he saw how anxious everyone was. Everyone also understood this point. They had to rush out first. So, they didn't care about anything else. They quickly followed behind Yi Shiwen and rushed out again. He actually dodged it, Zhang Yin said coldly. The murderous intention in his heart was at its peak. Yi Shiwen had ruined his plan as soon as he arrived. Moreover, Yi Shiwen gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so decisively. He wanted to eradicate future troubles. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would be so sensitive? His speed had truly reached the pinnacle. Senior brother, what should we do? They're trying to escape. When the other members of the Battle Saint clan saw that Zhang Yin had failed, they couldn't help but feel anxious. There's no need to rush. The time for the demon summoning banner to transform is almost here. Hold on a little longer, Zhang Yin couldn't help but say. Then he opened his mouth and said, think of a way to use secret methods to inform the various martial uncles outside. Let them come in and think of a way to kill Yi Shiwen. This fellow is really too dangerous. Unfortunately, we have a death feud with him. Since that's the case, we might as well go all the way and kill him completely. After he gave the order, he didn't care about anything else. He only focused on recovering his spiritual power. His eyes were fixed on the center of the group of demons. It was as if he could see through these demons and see the demon summoning banner that was floating among them. Yi Shiwen used the Tianyuan mirror to open a path. With his strength, there was no doubt that he could sweep away all the demons. However, many of those who followed him died in the process. They died of exhaustion. The sky was filled with demons. Even if Yi Shiwen wanted to protect them, he couldn't protect them all. Finally, everyone escaped from the heavens. After they escaped, their faces were overflowing with joy. Although many of them had died, the most important thing was that they had survived. Not so long ago, They had thought that they would die in there. They didn't expect that they would actually be able to escape one day. "Thank you, Brother Yi, for saving us," the divine puppet sect leader said respectfully. He didn't put on any airs just because he was a senior. In this world, what truly determined everything was strength. Only when a senior's strength far surpassed that of a junior would he have the right to put on airs. "You're welcome," Yi Shiwen said with a wave of his hand. "May I know which senior in my divine puppet sect brother Yi has a relationship with?" At this moment, the divine puppet sect leader asked tentatively. Yi Shiwen kept saying that he was indebted to a senior in their sect. That was why he was willing to take such a risk to save them. Thus, he also wanted to know which senior's casual kindness could actually bear fruit at this moment. "Senior Zhao Tianquang," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. "So it's him." The divine puppet sect leader suddenly understood. When he entered the sect, the divine puppet sect had already been in decline for a long time. He grew up listening to the many legends about Zhao Tianquang. He was the only monstrous existence in the divine puppet sect. To the divine puppet sect, it was really not easy. Since ancient times, there might be many people who could be called monstrous, but compared to the masses, they were still very rare. If distributed evenly among the sects, there might only be one or two people, and this was only for the sects that were conferred kings. After all, they were people who had the hope of breaking through to the next realm. Many people said that if Zhao Tianquang hadn't disappeared, the divine puppet sect might not have declined at all. On the contrary, they might have had another king and developed even more brilliantly. Everything started with Zhao Tianquang's death. "May I know how Brother Yi met Senior Zhao Tianquang?" the divine puppet sect leader hurriedly said. The other divine puppet sect experts also stared at Yi Shiwen. Ever since Zhao Tianquang disappeared, the search for him had never stopped. "Ah, Senior Zhao Tianquang has fallen." Yi Shiwen explained the whole story, but he concealed the fact that he had obtained the puppet. He had his own selfish motives. Moreover, if he revealed the truth and the people from the divine puppet sect came to ask for it, it would be difficult to decide whether he would give it to them or not. If that was the case, things would turn bad for no reason. Yi Shiwen took out Zhao Tianquang's corpse and told them about Zhao Tianquang's last wish. Originally, he planned to go personally, but since he had met the divine puppet sect leader, he could entrust it to him. "Ah!" The divine puppet sect leader could not help but sigh. He had thought that there was still a chance to find Zhao Tianquang. No matter what, he was the most talented super genius since the establishment of the divine puppet sect. If he could return, it would undoubtedly be of great significance to the current divine puppet sect. He knew that Yi Shiwen must have benefited a lot from this. Otherwise, he would not have helped them so eagerly. He even had some speculations. However, Yi Shiwen had just saved them, so it was not good for him to say anything. "Brother Yi, don't worry. I will definitely complete Senior Zhao Tianquang's last wish. No matter what, please accept a big gift from me, Brother Yi." The divine puppet sect leader did not wait for Yi Shiwen to object and bowed deeply. The people from the Confucian sect were completely dumbstruck by what they saw. They had looks of utter disbelief on their faces. He actually managed to save them. No way, he really did it? What a monster! The people of the Confucian sect were already convinced. They had vaguely thought that even if Yi Shiwen hadn't gone to his death, he wouldn't have been able to rescue those people. It was already very good if he could rescue one or two people. However, he had unexpectedly rescued so many people. This was no longer the concept of an ordinary person. It had completely subverted their worldview. Was there really someone who could do such a thing? All right, I am completely convinced. I am a human, and he is a monster. How can a human be compared to a monster? Yanbai could not help but smile bitterly. Even he, who had always thought highly of himself, could not help but be convinced. Gu Shirin could only say that she was convinced. This was indeed not an ordinary person. But why don't I see the people from the Battle Sage family? At this moment, Yanbai suddenly realized that among the people who followed Yi Shiwen out of the encirclement, there was not a single person from the Battle Sage family. This did not make sense. Even if they suffered heavy losses, it was impossible for them to be completely annihilated. But before he could ask Yi Shiwen, he saw Yi Shiwen turn around and rush into the crowd of monsters again. It seemed that he was going to break into the monster horde alone again. Someone asked him what he was going to do, and he only replied with one sentence: to take revenge. That's right, Yi Shiwen was going back to find trouble with Zhang Yan. After being tricked by him, it was not Yi Shiwen's style not to get back at him. If he had not dodged in time just now, the consequences would have been unimaginable. I want to see what you were up to, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. He could faintly sense that Zhang Yan had dragged everyone into this place, and it was most likely not an accident. In that case, he definitely had a plan. But what exactly was his plan? Anyway, no matter what he was planning, he could not let him succeed. He rushed all the way, without the burden of others. He was even more relaxed, because he only needed to pay attention to himself. Abruptly, he could only feel a terrifying demonic aura sweeping out, as though an unparalleled demonic emperor had awakened among these demons. That terrifying aura caused his hair to stand on end. It had completely surpassed all the realms he knew. The power was not that terrifying, but the level of power was ridiculously high. Intuition told him that this was what Zhang Yan was waiting for. He had to go and find out. Thinking of this, the demon wings behind him suddenly spread out, and he directly flew towards the source of the demonic aura. Chapter 2563. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's body emitted rings of blood-colored light. He instantly rushed into the group of monsters, sweeping them away. There was no enemy at all. However, he also discovered that there seemed to be no powerful monsters at all. Compared to when he rushed in earlier, the difficulty was completely different. This time, in order to get there as soon as possible, he did not hold back at all. He constantly sent out blood-colored light and sword aura, while constantly transforming the God Source into spiritual power to replenish his consumption. It seemed that the powerful monsters were all concentrated on the other side. He immediately realized that it must have something to do with the Battle Sage families. Very soon, he saw the masters of the Battle Sage families. At this time, they were desperately rushing towards the center of the monsters. But at this time, the demon kings that were originally scattered in various places were all concentrated here, desperately sniping them. The experts of the Battle Saint families were constantly being engulfed by the demon horde. Every step forward required them to pay a hefty price. No matter which force it would take a very long time to nurture a god. Generally, they would not let their sacrifices be in vain. However, at this time, these masters of the Battle Sage families were fighting to the death without retreating. They were not like when they were surrounded, where they still had strength to spare. And in the center of these people was Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan was muttering something, as if he was controlling something. And Yi Shiwen followed his gaze and saw that in the center of the monsters, in the center of the protection of the many demon kings, there was a ball of light that was bursting with extreme light. Thousands of tiny lights scattered and shone on the monsters. When these tiny lights passed through the layers of monsters and fell on Yi Shiwen, he was stunned to discover that this was not ordinary light, but laws and insights. This should be the secret that the entire monster group was guarding. No wonder so many powerful monsters could be born here. It was because of this. Obviously, Zhang Yan's target should be that ball of light. Yi Shiwen was very familiar with that aura. It was clearly the aura of a tool spirit. It belonged to the same lineage and was no different from Yimo. Although the conditions for the birth of each tool spirit could be said to be accidental, it was not without rules. So, Yi Shiwen recognized it immediately. But what kind of tool spirit can cause such a big commotion? Yi Shiwen was also somewhat baffled. Generally speaking, it would be very difficult for a tool spirit to survive if it left a magic tool. It was just like how a human soul would die if it left the body. Unless they cultivated to an extremely high level, like Yimo, their strength would definitely drop. For this artifact spirit to be able to cause such a huge commotion, it most likely had a powerful background. Above the artifact spirit, there was a flag that shone brightly and also released waves of demonic chi, as if it wanted to absorb the artifact spirit into the flag. Yi Shiwen opened the eyes of redemption and immediately understood that this flag actually wanted to absorb the tool spirit into it. he immediately understood why the Battle Saint family would bring someone else here. It was most likely because they wanted to divert the trouble to someone else. The others were simply used as targets to attract attention until the last moment. Now that there was no one to be their scapegoat, they could only do it themselves. Originally, they did not have many casualties, but now there were many casualties. It was completely different from before. And all of Zhang Yan's plans must be for this tool spirit. And that flag should be the flag that had ambushed Yi Shiwen before. Yi Shiwen sneered. Zhang Yan was really too naive. Did he really think that he would not dare to fight back if he attacked Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen did not make a move. Now was not the time to attack. It was not enough to just deal with Zhang Yan. He also had to obtain this tool spirit. To be able to cause such a big commotion, it must not be easy. The battle between the two sides became more and more intense. It seemed to have reached the most critical moment. Whether it was the side of the tool spirit or the side of the Battle Saint family, they were all giving it their all. The side of the tool spirit was especially anxious. Many demon kings began to join the battle, killing into the group of experts of the Battle Saint family. Even the weakest of these monster kings had powers comparable to those of the Sage Plane. Although they did not follow the standard path of becoming a god, no one knew how they were raised. They were all extraordinary, and their attacks were all very terrifying. Even though the Battle Sage families had brought their elites this time, they still couldn't withstand the demon army's relentless attacks. Almost every now and then, a Battle Sage family god would fall. These were all elites above the imperishable level, and they were many times more precious than the immortal level ones. Under normal circumstances, unless they were in a land of death, they would not die at all. But now, they were in a land of death. However, Zhang Yan's expression did not change at all. His eyes were bright as he stared fixedly at the ball of light. He was chanting an ancient incantation. These incantations seemed to contain a mysterious power that was able to firmly guide that ball of light. The people around him were getting fewer and fewer, but he did not care at all. The people of the Battle Saint family could only fight to the death because there was no way out. Other than fighting to the death, what else could they do? So even at this point, they could only believe in Zhang Yan and fight with all they had. Otherwise, they would die anyway, and even their families would not be able to live in peace after they died. Another expert from the Battle Saint family was smashed into pieces. There weren't many people left by Zhang Yan's side. As the number of people by his side decreased, he couldn't hold on any longer, and the rate of casualties also increased. Finally, when he was the last one left, Zhang Yan, who had always been cold and emotionless, finally opened his eyes and shouted, "Absorb!" Suddenly, the flag started to shake rapidly. Ripples of nomological laws started to spread out. Even though the ball of light was extremely unwilling, it was still continuously sucked in by the flag. After a short while it was sucked in, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He had finally succeeded. As for the experts of the Battle Saint family, it did not matter if they died. It could only be said that man proposes, God disposes. If he wanted to succeed, he would need someone to die. Originally, he had arranged for others, but since he did not succeed, he could only blame the bad luck of the people of the Battle Saint family. Although they were all his confidants and followers, he did not care at all. As long as he could successfully refine it, after a few hundred years, he would even dare to challenge those monstrous geniuses. At that time, he would have as many followers as he wanted. In this world, only the strong had the right to speak, and he was about to join the ranks of the strong. "Come back!" With a soft shout, the flag flew back to him as if it had spiritual chi. However, at this moment, suddenly, he saw a huge hand fall from the sky and grab the flag. "Who is it?" He immediately glared angrily. This was practically stealing food from the mouth of a tiger. He let out a loud roar, and the spiritual energy on his body began to burn. It condensed into the word battle in midair, and then it crushed down on the person behind him. Swish! A sword aura soared into the sky, and it actually shattered the word battle in an instant. It exploded in the void like fireworks. Yi Shiwen, this sword aura immediately made him realize because he had seen this sword aura before. And who else could it be other than Yi Shiwen? He gritted his teeth in hatred, and he was about to go crazy. He was so close to success, but he actually failed. This was the most infuriating. For this day, he had planned for thousands of years. Ever since he accidentally found out that there was a spirit of the demon summoning flag in the Kerfus Road, he had been planning. The flag in his hand was not ordinary either. Back then, the demon summoning flag was shattered in the battle, and this chess piece was actually refined from one of the fragments of the demon summoning flag. Otherwise, how could it have absorbed the remaining spirit of the demon summoning flag? Naturally, the demon summoning flag had been shattered, and the spirit of the demon summoning flag could not have been preserved completely. It was only a broken spirit. If it was a complete spirit, even if the demon summoning flag was not in his hand, it would not have been a problem to crush an ordinary king. How could he dare to find trouble with Yi Shiwen? Although it was only a fragment and a remnant spirit, if he could completely refine it, he still had the confidence to dare to challenge those monstrous geniuses in a short period of time. But now, Yi Shiwen had actually intercepted him. How could he tolerate this? This was simply too much. Of course, he had completely forgotten about the matter of him plotting against Yi Shiwen in the past. He looked over, and it was indeed Yi Shiwen's figure. "I think you're courting death," Zhang Yin roared. He was born in a battle sage family, and everyone respected him. No one had ever dared to plot against him like this. He slammed his palm down directly. This was the secret technique of their battle sage family, and a slap of his palm could smash the sun, moon, and stars. The palm power was extremely terrifying. His palm power directly enveloped Yi Shiwen, and he was going to slap him to death. This palm power transformed into countless waves of magic power, and it directly blasted on Yi Shiwen's head. Yi Shiwen did not even look at it. He directly turned around and pointed a finger. In an instant, this finger seemed to cover the entire sky. No one could escape from it. Zhang Yan's palm strike was completely shattered by this single finger. In that instant, it was as though the entire world was collapsing. Everything was collapsing. That terrifying finger power actually followed the sky and directly pointed at Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan was shocked and angry. He continuously blasted a few palms before he barely managed to eliminate Yi Shiwen's finger power. However, Yi Shiwen didn't intend to continue to entangle with him. Instead, he began to refine it. Under his sacrificial refining, he quickly understood what this was. It turned out to be the illustrious demon beckoning banner of ancient times. Chapter 2564. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be overjoyed after learning about it. This treasure could be said to be one of the most important treasures of the demon race. It was similar to the role and symbolic significance of the 4 treasures of the study to the Confucian sections. However, compared to the 4 treasures of the study, the demon summoning banner was much more tyrannical. Although it was only broken, if it could be completely refined, it would not be inferior to his 10,000 spell roulette. Moreover, it was completely different from the 10,000 spell roulette. He had personally refined it, and it was not completely formed yet. When the time came, it would naturally be one with him, just like the Tianyuan mirror to Yi Shiwen. The more he refined, the more furious Zhang Yan became. That was because he could already feel that the connection between him and the demon flag that had existed for so many years had suddenly been broken. It was as if it had been violently severed by something. He immediately turned pale with fright. How was this possible? He had been refining the demon summoning banner for thousands of years. It was impossible for it to be refined in such a short period of time. Otherwise, he would have lived all these years in vain. But no matter what, the connection between him and the demon summoning banner was indeed broken. He could not sense the situation of the demon summoning banner at all. Every time he tried to sense it, he could feel a shocking, evil aura rushing towards him, directly rushing into his mind. He did not dare to sense it at all. His gaze was extremely cold. Since this was the case, he could only kill Yi Shiwen. After killing him, no matter what, the demon summoning banner would definitely return to him. "Since you want to die, then don't blame me," Zhang Yin sneered. He did not care about the many demons around him that were already in a mess. Endless battle intent rushed out and filled the air, forming a huge phantom behind him. It was the ancestor of his battle sage family, the battle sage. He split the world, reversed time, and slammed down with his palm. The sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Every finger was condensed from hundreds of millions of laws. It was as if the sky was wrapped in it, making it impossible for Yi Shiwen to escape. Needless to say, Zhang Yan's strength was ridiculously tyrannical. Yi Shiwen did not move at all. On his palm, the demon summoning banner was constantly spinning and struggling, trying to escape from Yi Shiwen's hand. Yi Shiwen had only cut off the connection between him and Zhang Yan. In fact, it was far from refining. Now he was in the process of refining. Sounds of destruction could be heard all around him. Cracks began to appear in the sky under the immense pressure, as if the world was really going to be destroyed. At this critical moment, a beam of sword light appeared above his head and soared into the sky. Every pore on his body was spewing out sword chi, which was gathering crazily into the beam of sword light above his head, forming a huge sword that slashed down fiercely. Boom! With a loud roar, Yi Shiwen's sword light chopped down, killing countless monsters along the way, and then fell into that big hand. That big hand desperately resisted, but how could it resist the attack of Yi Shiwen's sword chi, and directly exploded in the air? This was Yi Shiwen's Dominator sword will. At this moment, Yi Shiwen was no longer restricted to one move at a time. He directly used his tyrannical sword will to attack. In this world, there was no sword technique more tyrannical than this. How could the sword techniques created by ordinary people be compared to those created by dominators and emperors? They were not even on the same level. What kind of sword technique is this? Zhang Yan turned pale with fright. It was this sword technique that had broken his attack just now. How come I've never seen this kind of sword technique before? It's really too strong. The shadow of the battle sage behind him, under the attack of this sword will, actually exploded. I was in the preliminary sacrificial training just now. I didn't have time to pay attention to you. You still had a chance to escape, but now it's too late even if you want to escape. Yi Shiwen's eyes were shining. He had already completed the preliminary sacrificial training. Although he was not yet able to unleash the power of the demon summoning banner, it was enough for him to absorb the demon summoning banner into the Tianyuan mirror. Die for me. He took a step forward and directly crossed the layers of space that were blocking him. He instantly appeared in front of Zhang Yan. The terrifying sword aura around his body soared into the sky, as if it wanted to pierce through the heavens and the earth. It directly connected with the great sun in the sky. Countless sword lights swept up from Yi Shiwen's body, filling up the heavens and the earth. The sword lights seemed to have transformed into powerful sword masters who were crazily cultivating and using their swords to prove their way. This was a world of swords, and it was also a flourishing age of swords. The sword lights soared into the sky and intertwined, as if they were the longitude and latitude lines between the heavens and the earth. Faintly, the endless Dominator's sword will swept out in a frenzy. These sword lights had not even slashed down. Just the remnant sword lights that had spread out had already shattered Zhang Yan's defenses layer by layer. The aura shield around his body was completely useless, and it was completely shattered. Then, the sword light slowly slashed down. It wanted to completely kill him in one fell swoop, not giving him any chance to be reborn. So it's actually the martial arts of a sovereign emperor. No wonder you're so insolent. Zhang Yan was not an ordinary person. Although his era was still far from the legendary war of resistance against the heavens, he was still able to quickly guess the origin of Yi Shiwen's swordsmanship. The Dominator's sword of a sovereign emperor had swept across a region in the past, killing the allied army in fear. However, he wasn't worried at all. On the contrary, he laughed heartily. The heavens are really helping me. There's actually someone who can deliver an Emperor Lord-level martial art to our doorstep. Our Battle Saint family should be prosperous. As he spoke, a snow-white battle robe appeared on his body. This was the invincible secret technique that his family relied on to sweep across the world. Relying on this snow-white battle robe, his strength increased crazily. Compared to before, it had increased a lot. Yi Shiwen's sword intent slashed down, and a large portion of the sword intent that leaked out was absorbed by his battle robe. Then it was transformed into his strength, making it even more powerful. It was as if a gap had appeared in the heavens and the earth. His snow-white battle robe absorbed all the energy in the heavens and the earth, and then poured it into his body. This caused his entire body to instantly sweep with boundless battle intent, causing Yi Shiwen's clothes to flutter in the wind. You're the first in so many years to be able to force out his battle robe. It's your honor to die under my battle robe, Zhang Yin said coldly. Boundless power poured down, causing the aura shield around his body to become even more intense. Yi Shiwen looked at the snow-white battle robe on Zhang Yan's body, and his expression became serious. The magic power in Zhang Yan's body was skyrocketing, but at this moment his face was somewhat pale. He did not look like a living person at all, but more like a ghost. At this moment, he was the only god in the heavens and the earth. He was the ruler of everything in the heavens and the earth. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes of redemption, and he clearly saw that the material of Zhang Yan's snow-white battle robe was not ordinary material at all. Instead, it was made up of tiny times. There could be 100 billion of them, or maybe 1 trillion of them. All of them were small worlds. Within these small worlds, there was a very brilliant civilization. Every time an attack was launched at him, it would be absorbed by the many worlds on the snow-white battle robe around his body. These worlds formed the snow-white battle robe, protecting him, and completely blocking Yi Shiwen's attacks. It's my turn, Yi Shiwen. If you had escaped before, I would have let it go. But now, you actually dare to come back. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you still want to barge in. You're courting death. Zhang Yin was furious. His hands suddenly tore apart, and in an instant, he used his hands as a knife and stabbed them into Yi Shiwen's body. This battle robe is a bit interesting. Yi Shiwen raised his hand and blasted out a punch. As soon as he punched out, the heavens and the earth exploded, covering the sky and covering the sun. You think you can stop me? Obediently accept your death today. At this moment, Zhang Yan's nostrils were like thunder, and he was furious. His palm suddenly changed and directly became a terrifying, unique skill. This attack was truly earth-shattering. It was unpredictable and did not give Yi Shiwen any time to escape at all. In an instant, it struck Yi Shiwen's head. Clang! There was a loud sound, and behind Yi Shiwen, the demon's wings suddenly stretched out, protecting him within and blocking this overwhelming attack. However, when Yi Shiwen separated again, he saw that the surrounding environment had completely changed. It had become a huge battlefield. This was the holy kingdom that Zhang Yan had created, and this holy kingdom was the condensation of his martial arts will. There were shouts and cries everywhere. These were the battles that he had experienced in the past, and he had condensed these memories into these battlefields. Although it was different from the orthodox holy kingdom, this was the secret method of the battle sage family, and it was extremely powerful. Kill, kill, kill. Countless shouts and cries seemed to break through the sky. Countless spears pierced from all directions, wanting to stab Yi Shiwen alive and turn him into a hedgehog. Clang, clang, clang. These spears seemed to be just an illusion, but when they pierced towards Yi Shiwen, they were real and not fake. It was just that these spears could not get close to Yi Shiwen's body at all. All of them were blocked by the blood-red light curtain that hung down from the Tianyuan mirror, and they could not advance an inch. Yi Shiwen sneered, "Is this all you've got? Where did the power that you used to sneak attack me go? Or is it that you can only attack from behind like this?" Yi Shiwen looked at Zhang Yin, who was high up in the sky, and could not help but mock him. Zhang Yin was so angry that his face was livid. However, the power in his body was gathering, and it turned into a shocking battle aura that slashed downwards. "What are you talking about? Die!" That boundless power came crashing down in an instant. Chapter 2565. All the power in Zhang Yan's body was burning. The power gathered was all condensed into that battle aura, intending to kill Yi Shiwen. At that moment, Yi Shiwen finally could not take it anymore. He shouted coldly, "Do you really think you're my match? I was just teasing you just now. Now, I'll show you my true power." As he said this, something on his body seemed to shatter, falling apart inch by inch. Yi Shiwen let out a loud roar, which transformed into a terrifying power that spun around his body, forming a huge storm. It was as if a giant beast had awakened in his body. How is this possible? How can you still have such power hidden? Zhang Yin was stunned. Yi Shiwen was fighting him, who was in the late Sage realm, with the power of the early Sage realm, and he actually had the upper hand. This was already unreasonable and monstrous enough. But what was even more terrifying was that Yi Shiwen had actually hidden his power, and had not released all of it. How is this possible? This completely overturned his worldview. From what he knew, it was impossible to have such power. How did he suppress it? He did not even feel it at all. It should be known that if it was deliberately suppressed, it would be fine in a normal battle. But in such an intense battle just now, it was impossible for him not to feel it at all. Could it be a cultivation vest? He immediately thought of the only possible reason for this. It was because Yi Shiwen did not look like he had broken the seal, and there were no special fluctuations like when a seal was broken. He also knew about the cultivation avatar, but he didn't choose it. In fact, those who chose the cultivation avatar could only be said to be the feather of a phoenix or the horn of a qilin. Not everyone could bear the feeling of the whole body's power being sealed. Although this was very beneficial for one's cultivation, it was not something that everyone could bear. Otherwise, cultivation vests would have long been common. This was not a seal. Sealing a part of one's power was sealed away, but this kind of cultivation vest kept one's power, but they could not be used at all. Of course, the most important thing was that the method to refine the cultivation armor had already been lost. It was passed down from ancient times, and no one knew how to refine it now. Perhaps the Weapon Emperor knew how to refine it back then, but with the Weapon Emperor's strength and cultivation, how could he possibly refine something like this? It would be completely useless. That kind of person had already transcended everything. He only needed a moment of enlightenment to change the world. However, this also made Yi Shiwen even more frightening. His cultivation had been restricted by the cultivation vest, but he was still able to erupt with such tyrannical strength. And his true strength was naturally even more frightening. In an instant, he didn't have enough time to stop Yi Shiwen. He saw Yi Shiwen's imposing aura completely radiating, carrying supreme power. A sword chi was released from his hand, and in an instant, it chopped down. This terrifying power even caused him to tremble with fear. It was impossible to resist. How can he be so powerful? Zhang Yin could clearly feel the battle robes on his body shattering in an instant, almost forcing him to his knees. Just the aura alone was enough to suffocate him. He roared. Naturally, he wouldn't be willing to die. In an instant, an astonishing aura erupted from his body. The reason why the Battle Sage family was able to obtain such a great reputation was because their old master, the Battle Sage, had experienced countless battles and dominated the battlefield. Naturally, there were many secret techniques that could stimulate the eruption of his strength. In an instant, he completely erupted. That power shot up to the sky, blowing the nearby demons away. Those that were closer were even crushed to death on the spot. At this moment, outside the demon horde, the Confucian sect experts and the divine puppet sect experts from the other sects could clearly see two astonishing auras sweeping through the demon horde. That aura, could it be the Battle Sage family's mad battle technique? Gu Shiring exclaimed in shock. The Battle Sage family's mad battle technique was also considered a very astonishing martial art. It was also very famous. However, in general, unless one was forced into a desperate situation, they wouldn't use this method at all. The reason was very simple. The after effects of this method were too great, so great that they had to be careful. Judging from that aura, the person who used it was undoubtedly Zhang Yin. But who could force Zhang Yin into a desperate situation? He had a shocking guess in his heart, and that was that it was Yi Shiwen. Although he didn't know what kind of martial arts it was, but he couldn't mistake that aura. It was undoubtedly Yi Shiwen's aura. In other words, it was very likely that Yi Shiwen had forced him into a desperate situation. Don't forget, Yi Shiwen said that he was going to take revenge. Just now, those people from the Divine Puppet sect were still complaining that the Battle Sage family was too unscrupulous. They actually dared to attack them at such a crucial moment. If Yi Shiwen wanted to take revenge, it could only be Zhang Yan. Then the following deduction was logical. He more or less knew about Zhang Yan's strength. Zhang Yan wasn't weaker than himself, and he couldn't possibly force Zhang Yan into such a state. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough, but in a situation where countless demons were rampaging, it was difficult for him to even protect himself, let alone force Zhang Yan into such a state. It was almost impossible. If this was the case, then Yi Shiwen's strength was truly tyrannical to the extent that even he was trembling with fear. That imposing manner was far beyond his imagination. Could it be that Yi Shiwen had also used some secret technique? Thinking about it carefully, this was the most plausible possibility. And the others also thought of this at almost the same time. They weren't stupid and could calculate many things with just a few words. They were even more frightened in their hearts, but at this moment, no one wanted to say anything for Zhang Yan, especially the people from the Divine Puppet sect. They hated those people from the Battle Sage family even more. It was fine that those people couldn't leave, but they actually wanted to make them stay. It was simply despicable. Thinking of this, it was already good enough that they didn't help Yi Shiwen kill the other party. What sympathy did he expect from them? In fact, they even faintly hoped that Yi Shiwen could successfully kill the other party. And at this moment, in the crowd of demons, the first wave of attacks between the two had completely collided. Terrifying power instantly swept out. Yi Shiwen didn't even use any special martial arts. Instead, he simply destroyed Zhang Yan's attack with a palm. Boom! 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 Such intense collisions did not stop. The battle between the two did not fear anyone at all. Although those demons looked powerful, when they encountered these two people who had already gone berserk, they all met with great misfortune. It was more than just dismal to describe it. It was simply wailing. Basically, within the range of the battle between the two, the demons had all disappeared. Some had automatically avoided, and the rest that didn't had already been turned into ashes. Every time they collided, Zhang Yan would constantly retreat, and his disadvantage became more serious. Although he had already used all his methods, the gap between him and Yi Shiwen had not shrunk. On the contrary, it was further widening. In his eyes, Yi Shiwen was simply toying with him. He didn't even use his full strength. Even so, it had already completely crushed all of his confidence. This kind of power was not something he could contend with at all. The only thing that supported him was his last breath, and it definitely couldn't be the last breath of a human. Boom! Zhang Yan's chest was smashed by Yi Shiwen's punch, and instantly, a bloody hole appeared. His entire body flew out like a meteor, and it was unknown how many demons that couldn't dodge in time were killed. Yi Shiwen took a step forward, and his expression was cold. He directly chased after Zhang Yan, wanting to truly kill him. Roar, Yi Shiwen, as long as I don't die today, I will definitely make you die in the future. Zhang Yan roared, and his expression was abnormally ferocious. He gritted his teeth, and his eyelids were twitching. Do you think you still have a future? Yi Shiwen said, I hate people who backstab me the most. From the moment you backstab me, you should have known that this day will come. Yi Shiwen chased after him, and Zhang Yan roared. He had never thought that this day would come. In fact, he didn't even think that it was anything great. If he backstabbed Yi Shiwen, then so be it. Even if those people from the Divine Puppet sect were dissatisfied with him. So what? As for Yi Shiwen, the so-called #1 person of this generation, he had no scruples at all. This type of people all had one thing in common, and that was that they had extraordinary confidence in themselves. They didn't believe that anyone could surpass them, and at most, they could only be on par with them. Now that he knew, he regretted it, but he was even more resentful, and he hated Yi Shiwen to the core. Yi Shiwen, just wait for your death. Zhang Yan roared, and a scroll suddenly appeared in his hand, and he suddenly crushed it. In the void, a space door suddenly appeared. This was the final trump card that Zhang Yan had left for himself. After all, no one dared to say that they would definitely succeed. It was very necessary to have a necessary trump card. You want to leave? You're dreaming. It was unknown when a wheel had appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand, but it continued to spin, growing larger and larger, and suddenly it crashed down. Countless laws formed a frenzy of energy that destroyed everything. Before the space door could fully open, it was destroyed by Yi Shiwen on the spot and shattered into pieces. Yi Shiwen, you dare? Zhang Yin glared at Yi Shiwen, but before he could finish speaking, a blood-red sword chi descended from the sky and directly slashed into his body. In an instant, his spirit was destroyed. Chapter 2566. Yi Shiwen seemed to be able to hear the angry roars of someone behind the portal, but he did not care. At a time like this, a slight mistake could cost him his life. Who would have the time to care about his background? After killing Zhang Yin, Yi Shiwen did not leave immediately. Instead, he continued to refine the demon summoning flag. Although he did not have enough time to refine the demon summoning flag completely, once he had refined it to a certain extent, he would be able to unlock some of its functions. After refining some of them, he understood how these demons came to be. They were all formed from the demonic aura of the demon summoning banner, and these demons did not appear out of thin air. They were all famous experts of the demon clan in the past. The power of the demon calling flag was boundless, but there was another rumor about the demon calling flag. In the past, when a supreme expert of the demon race refined the demon calling flag, he refined a strand of the primordial spirit of many experts of the demon race into it in order to control the endless demon race. Under the demon calling flag, the experts of the demon race did not dare to not come. They could only be ordered around by him, otherwise they would die a horrible death. That was why the demon race was able to establish the ancient heavenly court and dominate a region. Because of this, the power of the demon race was gathered. They were invincible, and they were united. Later, many magic tools were refined by imitating the demon summoning flag. For example, the demon summoning flag in Yi Shiwen's hands. However, compared to the demon summoning flag made by the masters of the emperor level, it was not on the same level. The difference in power was like heaven and earth. Although the demon summoning flag was damaged, in the end, even if it was not damaged, it was only a high-grade divine tool. As long as Yi Shiwen had enough materials, he could refine it in a matter of minutes. However, the demon summoning flag was different. Its degree of damage was far worse than that of the demon summoning flag. However, whether it was the refining technique or the required supreme divine object, it wasn't something that the current Yi Shiwen could obtain. Fortunately, even though it was just a fragment, the new demon summoning banner had taken shape. Even though its power had been greatly reduced, it was still a powerful Dharma treasure. Especially with the army of monsters in hand, it would be of great use at critical moments. Zhang Yin had planned for thousands of years and fought desperately to get his hands on the demon summoning flag. In Yi Shiwen's eyes, it was just something that he could use. He had a lot of good things with him. With the demon summoning banner in hand, the surrounding demons did not dare to approach. They only dared to roar from afar. After another day and night, Yi Shiwen finally completed the preliminary refining of the demon beckoning banner and was able to display some of its power. He held the demon beckoning banner in his hand and suddenly waved it. Instantly, those monsters rushed over with strange cries and were absorbed into the demon beckoning banner. Originally, there was an endless army of monsters, but in a short period of time, almost all of them were absorbed. At that moment, Yi Shiwen was finally able to clearly see how many monsters there were through the demon summoning banner. There were more than 1,000 monsters at the Sage Plane alone, and more than 100 at the later stage of the Sage Plane. There were even 10 powerful monsters at the peak of the Sage Plane. They were the 10 great demon kings. Powerful demons like the Bai Fong that Yi Shiwen had seen before were among them. There were countless undead levels, immortal levels, and demigods. Yi Shiwen could not help but gasp. The strength of the ancient heavenly court was simply unimaginable. That was because these monsters did not come from nowhere. They were formed from the primordial spirits of the powerful demon gods and demon kings in ancient times. Their strength could not be compared to their original bodies. Their strength could not be compared to when they were at their peak. At their peak, the ancient heavenly court probably had thousands of titled kings, and the 10 great demon kings were probably all at the peak of the titled king realm. How terrifying was this strength? It should be known that the Hidden Valley only had 7 titled kings, and they could already be called a first-rate titled sect. At that moment, he deeply understood how big the difference was between a titled sect that had the lineage of an emperor and an ordinary titled sect. Moreover, even an ordinary titled sect that had the lineage of an emperor could not be compared to the ancient heavenly court in terms of strength. After all, even a powerful force like the martial arts sect could only dominate the heaven realm and control some worlds. However, the ancient heavenly court had once ruled the world, and all the worlds in the universe had once trembled under their power. Since ancient times, the forces that could be considered as ruling the world, apart from the Heavenly Clan, the Dragon, Phoenix, and Shieling clans could be considered as one. The rest was the ancient heavenly court. After that, there was no such behemoth. Even the G clan, an imperial clan, could not be compared to such strength. That was because when the ancient heavenly court was at its peak, it was said that there were several emperors in power. Although the G clan, an imperial clan, had produced several human emperors, they had all appeared one after another. There had never been several human emperors in power at the same time. One human emperor was enough to rule the world, but if there were other emperors in power at the same time, it would not be enough to rule the world. However, the Demon Clan had several emperors in power at the same time, which was enough to rule the universe. If it was not for the Heavenly Clan, no one would be able to shake their position. Their power was so great that it was almost equivalent to the alliance of many regal sects. From this, one could imagine the power of the Heavenly Clan. In the first war of resistance against the heavens, the original overlords, the Dragon, Phoenix, and Shieling clans, were crippled and had yet to recover. In the second war of resistance against the heavens, the ancient heavenly court was destroyed. Moreover, the Devil King of the Demon Clan and the Human Emperor of the Human Clan had fallen in this battle. Defeating 2 overlords in a row, the Heavenly Clan was simply amazing. For him, that level of things was still very far away. However, the greatest significance of the Demon Summoning Banner was that the monsters in it could be fed. It was also possible to slowly feed them back to their peak state. Although it was only theoretical, even if it was only like this for now, it would be of great help to him. In addition to this function, the Demon Summoning Banner itself was also a powerful magic tool. As long as he completely refined it, he would be able to add another powerful weapon. Even if he were to be crowned as a regal king one day, the Demon Summoning Banner would still be useful. Without the obstruction of the monsters in the sky, Yi Shiwen suddenly appeared in front of everyone. When everyone saw this scene, they could not help but be a little stunned. What the hell happened? Why did all the monsters in the sky disappear? Not a single one was left? Moreover, it did not seem like they were all killed. Moreover, there were so many monsters that it was impossible for a human to kill them all. Even if in the eyes of everyone, Yi Shiwen was a monster who could kill and come back out 7 times, being able to kill and coming back out 7 times and being able to kill all these monsters were not the same concept at all. There was definitely something fishy going on here. It was just that they did not know what exactly had happened. Especially, where did the people from the Battle Sage families go? If they were to say that they had all escaped, they would not believe it even if they were beaten to death. Other than a monster like Yi Shiwen, who could kill and come back out 7 times and still be able to escape. Moreover, judging from the situation just now, Yi Shiwen would definitely not let them go. Although they did not see how Yi Shiwen did it, they could more or less guess that they had probably been killed by Yi Shiwen. However, no one sympathized with the people from the Battle Sage families. Especially the people from the Divine Puppet sect, they felt even more satisfied. The sooner these guys died, the sooner they could be reincarnated. Most importantly, they did not kill them, so they did not have to worry about the Battle Sage families finding trouble with them. This could not be better. Even Gu, Shuriying, and the others from the Confucian sect did not have the slightest bit of sympathy. Zhang Yan was an overbearing person, and they had many conflicts with him. He had long been unpopular. However, although no one sympathized with the people from the Battle Sage families, They could not help but gasp when they saw that all the experts from the battle sage families had been killed. Although many people hated them to the point of gnashing their teeth, those who dared to take action and had the ability to do so were very few. Not to mention, they had slaughtered so many experts. If Yi Shiwen knew about this, he could not help but feel wronged. Because although Zhang Yin was killed by him, the deaths of the other gods from the battle sage families had nothing to do with them. They had all died in the mouths of the monster army and had become nourishment for the battle sage families. Sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. Yi Shiwen did not seem the least bit moved by the annihilation of the battle sage families. Everyone secretly admired him in their hearts. To be able to kill Zhang Yin without batting an eyelid, his psychological quality was not ordinary. Zhang Yin was not an ordinary person. In this generation of the battle sage families, he was unparalleled. To think that he had actually died in the hands of a junior who was far younger than him. Presumably, he would not be able to justify his death. No. Many thanks to Brother Yi for saving us this time. The divine puppet sect master thanked him again. However, in his heart, he did not mention that Yi Shiwen had killed the people from the battle sage families, as if it had never happened. In any case, they did not know anything. What? How do you think he died? Who knows? In any case, I don't know. Whether you believe it or not, I believe it anyway. It was nothing. No need to thank me again and again. Yi Shiwen said, if you need my help in the future, just let me know. If there is an opportunity in the future, I hope that Brother Yi can visit our sect. We will definitely welcome you with open arms. The others also opened their mouths one after another. However, they had tacitly avoided the matter regarding the battle sage families, as if it had never happened. Yi Shiwen naturally understood what they meant. However, he did not expose them. It did not matter to him. Even if the battle sage families were angry, he was not afraid. The battle sage families had an old ancestor of the King Realm. However, the Hidden Valley also had 7 King Realm experts. However, it was better to avoid trouble. Everyone was very sensible, and it could save him a lot of trouble. Then, Yi Shiwen stepped forward and said to Gu Shuriying, sorry to have delayed your formation. You go ahead and don't worry about me. When there is news, just inform me. I will rush over immediately. All right, we are relieved to see that you are fine. See you then. Gu Shuriying and the others were not pretentious. After being delayed for a few days, they were indeed anxious. So, they bid farewell and left one after another. Chapter 2567. After the people from the Confucian sect left, the people from the Divine Puppet sect were not in the mood to stay any longer. After experiencing such a huge change, it could be said that their injuries were almost fatal. They needed time to digest. This time, they had originally come because of the Battle Sage family. Who would have thought that they would be tricked by Zhang Yin? Except for a small number of people who wanted to continue exploring this secret territory, most of them had lost interest. The Divine Puppet sect was even more eager to bring back Zhao Tianquang's corpse. No matter what, he was still a great senior in their sect. They could not let his corpse wander outside. After Yi Shiwen bid farewell to these people, he did not stay any longer. He went according to the information he had gathered from the Heaven Pavilion. Although 100,000 years had passed, the environment of the entire secret territory had changed. However, it had not changed to the extent that Yi Shiwen could not find his way. In his eyes, nothing was more important than finding the reincarnation grass. Yi Shiwen flew for a day and a night, and finally arrived at the huge swamp which was recorded in the Heavenly Pavilion's report. The entire swamp was very huge. From time to time, 1 or 2 small islands could be seen scattered on the islands. On the islands, towering trees rose from the ground. It was a spectacular sight. The nearby swamp looked extremely calm, but it was this calmness that made it look even more eerie. After Yi Shiwen opened the Eye of Redemption, he discovered that there was a small city built on an island in the depths of the swamp. The entire city looked weather-beaten. It should have been built for a long time. He thought for a moment and decided to go there first to determine the direction. Although he had the information from the Heaven Pavilion, after so many years, some changes had already occurred. Some places had even undergone earth-shaking changes due to special events. According to the information from the Heaven Pavilion, the reincarnation grass grew in the central area of this swamp. He took a big stride forward. His body was as light as a swallow as he swept across the swamp. He had not felt this way for a long time. He could now fly anywhere he wanted. He could even tear through space and pass through it. He did not need to use lightness technique at all. However, this swamp was shrouded by some kind of mysterious power. It was difficult for even birds to cross, so they could only choose to traverse it. Of course, with his current movement technique, it naturally couldn't be compared to how it was in the past. It was like he'd shrunk the ground into an inch, and he'd instantly appeared over 500 m away. His figure flickered on the swamp, and every time he flickered, he would fly a long distance away. However, when his feet landed on the swamp, he didn't leave any footprints. He had definitely achieved the highest level of leaving no footprints on the snow. The city was not too far away from the Eye of Redemption, but when he really walked, it was like a mountain that could not be seen. Moreover, he could not fly, so it took him another 4 hours to cross the swamp and arrive at the city. The entire city was somewhat dilapidated. There were not many people, only about 1,000 or so. However, although there weren't many people here, but each of them was an expert. Some people had set up stalls here, selling some of the treasures they had obtained from the swamp. It had already been a few days since Yi Shiwen had arrived here. However, everyone was waiting quietly. Even if they had nothing to do, they didn't go out. Soon, Yi Shiwen knew what these people were waiting for. It was the place mentioned in the information received by the Heaven Pavilion previously. When this secret territory opened last time, a temple appeared in the depths of the swamp. The entire temple was extremely mysterious, but the time was too short at that time. The opening time of the Kerfurst Road was going to pass soon, so they didn't have time to explore it all. This time, there were even more people coming. There were thousands of people from various races. Even the local aborigines had come after receiving the news. These thousands of people gathered in this small city to wait for the news and didn't go out. Yi Shiwen originally planned to set off first, but he had no choice at this time. Since the temple hadn't appeared yet, he couldn't do anything even if he was anxious. He could only choose to wait with these people. He waited quietly for almost half a year. In this half a year, he just found a small courtyard to live in. There was no owner here, so naturally, there was no rent or anything. However, in this half a year, he was harassed by many people, and many people had their eyes on this small courtyard. Because in this half a year, more and more people came. Because the city wasn't big to begin with, it was soon full of people. It was inevitable that some conflicts and contradictions would break out, especially with these gods. Each of them was arrogant and unruly. God knew how many people came to look for trouble, but they were all sent away by him. With his current strength, although he couldn't be regarded as the top in this Kerfurst Road, as long as he didn't provoke the evildoers, he could be said to be unstoppable. Even if he encountered those evildoers, he still had some trump cards and means, but he didn't use them easily. After Yi Shiwen sent away those who came to look for trouble, he mainly used his time on cultivation. In this half a year, he constantly absorbed the energy contained in the source of light, constantly enhancing his magic power and skills. The source of light indeed lived up to its name. No wonder Jun Dingtian paid such a huge price to get his hands on it. If Jun Dingtian had gotten his hands on it, his cultivation would have advanced by leaps and bounds again. Fortunately, it was now in Yi Shiwen's hands. Even Yi Shiwen had an impulse to continue to cultivate without limit. It didn't take long for Yi Shiwen to use the source of light. Although Yi Shiwen had just entered the early stage of the Sage Realm, he had cultivated to the peak of the early stage of the Sage Realm in less than half a year. If he continued to cultivate, it would only take a few years for him to steadily enter the middle stage of the Sage Realm. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time. Just as he was about to make a further breakthrough, news finally came. Someone in the depths of the fog saw the temple appear. The entire city was in an uproar. Everyone was crazily rushing in the direction of the temple. Even Yi Shiwen was no exception. For a moment, people could be seen flashing. Since no one could fly, They could only run on the swamp. No one had time to think too much. They did more checks. Very soon, he paid a heavy price for it. Huge mouths emerged from the depths of the swamp, biting down on the gods and dragging them into the water. The water in the entire swamp was very muddy, and no one could see clearly what was in it. However, Yi Shiwen saw it clearly. The moment those monsters left the water surface, he instantly saw that they were giant crocodiles. Each of them was extremely powerful. He opened the Eye of Redemption and looked down. Although he couldn't see clearly because of the law's isolation, he could still see dense life auras lurking among them. There were at least tens of thousands of them. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Just who was it that raised so many fierce crocodiles here? One must know that these were not ordinary people, but gods. They were swallowed in one gulp without even having the chance to struggle. Roar! With a roar, a huge mouth emerged from the swamp and shrouded his whole body. However, how could Yi Shiwen be compared with an ordinary god? He immediately took a big stride forward, and his whole body flashed hundreds of meters away. The attack of this fierce crocodile fell on thin air. Then, a sword light chopped down towards this fierce crocodile and instantly beheaded it. Blood filled the air and dyed the distance of thousands of meters red. More fierce crocodiles smelled the scent and gathered. Yi Shiwen knew that he couldn't stay for long, so he quickly fled in the direction of the temple. There was still a long distance from here to the temple, but there was already a person who was accidentally swallowed by a fierce crocodile here. Everyone was panicking, but it was hard to get off. If they turned back, there would be endless groups of fierce crocodiles. It was the same if they went forward. They couldn't fly, so they couldn't escape. They could only move forward with all their might. It didn't seem like a long time, but it took them 4 hours to run. Although Yi Shiwen started later, his skills were exquisite. Those fierce crocodiles couldn't do anything to him. Hundreds of fierce crocodiles died in his hands along the way. Soon he caught up with the first group and walked to the front. Those who could get to the front were all sages without exception, and many of them were in the middle or late stage of the sages. Most importantly, these people were in groups of 3 to 5. They were divided into several large groups and supported each other as they moved forward. Yi Shiwen was the only one who could fight his way into the first group alone, so he attracted a lot of attention. Soon, the leader of one of the largest groups, a bald man, gave a signal with his eyes. Suddenly, a skinny feather man separated from the group. He was born with wings, so his movement technique was very fast. After a while, he actually flew towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen immediately noticed the movement of the man from the feather race. More importantly, behind him, more than a dozen powerful fierce crocodiles rushed over, bringing trouble to others. How could Yi Shiwen not understand that this was directed at him? It should be these teams eradicating their competitors. And among these first group of people, Yi Shiwen was alone. So he was the easiest to deal with. But was Yi Shiwen really that easy to deal with? His lips curled into a cold smirk. The divine kingdom beneath his feet suddenly spread out and enveloped the feather race man. Boundless nomological laws turned into 2 giant hands that instantly locked the feather race man in place. Chapter 2568. The man from the Feather Clan was shocked. The grin on his face froze. He had never thought that Yi Shiwen would dare to fight back. They were a group, and Yi Shiwen was alone. He had thought that Yi Shiwen would at most run away. He had never thought that Yi Shiwen would dare to fight back. However, Yi Shiwen's fight back was not enough to make him panic. He found that he could not activate his divine kingdom and was completely suppressed. This was impossible for him, because he was in the middle stage of the Sage Plane, and his opponent was only in the early stage of the Sage Plane. How could he make him unable to move? Although the Sage Plane had condensed a divine kingdom, there was still a huge gap between divine kingdoms. A difference of 1 level could make a huge difference. How did Yi Shiwen do it? However, he did not have time to think. More than a dozen crocodiles bit out of the swamp and divided the man from the Feather Clan. Blood splattered and bone fragments flew. His spiritual soul was destroyed in an instant, and his primordial spirit was torn to pieces. It was enough to show how terrifying these crocodiles were. Only his head was left on the surface of the swamp. He still had a look of disbelief. He could not break free from Yi Shiwen's divine kingdom. Victory or defeat was decided in an instant. There was no chance for him to escape. In his mind, the last thing he thought was that if he had known this would happen, he would not have tried to divert the trouble to someone else. This was his home. If he had known this would happen, he would have killed Yi Shiwen himself. However, he would never have known that if he had done it himself, he would have died even faster. Yi Shiwen was just too lazy to do it. Otherwise, one sword strike would have been enough. Fourth, the bald man and his group shouted in grief and indignation. They were very close, but they did not expect to lose their lives because they thought they were just going to do a mission that was not dangerous at all. They looked at Yi Shiwen as if they wanted to devour him. In fact, it seemed as if they wanted to swallow him alive. They might have come over to kill Yi Shiwen if they weren't besieged by a large number of vicious crocodiles. Yi Shiwen was too lazy to pay attention to these people's gazes. After all, he didn't have much time to waste. After what had happened, the other groups became somewhat wary of Yi Shiwen. That person was very strange. He looked like he was only in the early stage of the sage plane, and he did not seem to be very outstanding among the first group. However, he had been able to easily drag out an expert in the middle stage of the sage plane to death. Although he had used some tricks, it was precisely because of that made it all the more strange. If one didn't know the background of such a person, it would be best not to provoke him. Otherwise, there might be serious consequences. However, they didn't have the time to worry about it. After running for a long time, they finally saw the primer of the temple. Everyone finally let out a sigh of relief. Along the way, everyone's hearts were tense. They didn't dare to relax for even a moment. Although it was still a distance away, it was already right in front of him. Among these people, Yi Shiwen took the lead. He was at the initial stage of the sage plane, surpassing a large number of masters at the middle and late stage of the sage plane. He was the first to rush into the temple within a dozen breaths. It was a very simple and unadorned temple with a very strange design. No one knew which period it was built in, and no one knew what kind of god was worshipped in it. The people who came to explore were all gods, and many of them enjoyed incense in various worlds. Temples were built everywhere to spread faith, and they didn't even hesitate to fight for it. Therefore, he wasn't unfamiliar with the temple, but he didn't know what kind of god it was worshipping. However, to be able to build it in such a place and raise so many fierce crocodiles, he was afraid that it was not an ordinary person. Yi Shiwen directly rushed into the temple. There was a row of halls, and in the halls, there were huge statues erected. Their faces could not be seen clearly, but Yi Shiwen couldn't be bothered to look at them at the moment. Based on the information he had obtained before, Yi Shiwen quickly determined the direction and flew in a certain direction. Reincarnation grass. Where is the reincarnation grass? Yi Shiwen kept searching, and he kept looking in those temples. His figure was very fast, and soon, a huge herbal garden appeared in front of him. However, there were no medicinal herbs in this huge herb garden. Moreover, it was very desolate, as if all the spirit energy had been absorbed. And in the center of the entire herb garden, there was a dark gray medicinal herb blooming with brilliant light. Countless principles were fluttering up and down, and the spirit principles were extremely rich. Yi Shiwen could feel the fluctuations of the spirit principles even though he was very far away. Reincarnation grass. Yi Shiwen confirmed that this was indeed the reincarnation grass. It looked exactly the same as the reincarnation grass that the Dr. King had described to him previously. The entire herb garden was completely withered, and the spirit energy of all the spiritual veins was being transported in the direction of the reincarnation grass. The entire herb garden only supported this reincarnation grass. It could be said that the reincarnation grass had overbearingly absorbed the spirit energy of the other medicinal herbs, which resulted in the other medicinal herbs not having enough spirit energy to survive. Yi Shiwen casually looked around, and he could see that many medicinal herbs had completely withered. Many had already turned into powder, and some had even turned into flying ash. This reincarnation grass was a bit too overbearing. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't care so much at this time. He had finally found the reincarnation grass after more than 1,000 years. He took a step forward and appeared in front of the reincarnation grass in an instant. He broke the protective enchantment of the reincarnation grass and successfully snatched the reincarnation grass. Then, he stored it in the Tianyuan mirror. He didn't stay any longer and flew out of the herb garden. He wasn't interested in this temple in the first place. Now that he had obtained the reincarnation grass, he could leave the Kurfürst Road after dealing with the matters of the Confucian sect. Perhaps others had come for the legendary opportunity of the Kurfürst Road, but Yi Shiwen wasn't that interested in that opportunity. He wouldn't be obsessed with this so-called opportunity. Kid, hand over what you've obtained just now, and I'll leave your corpse intact. Yi Shiwen hadn't left the herb garden when he heard a sneer. The bald man and his group, who had previously caused trouble for Yi Shiwen, appeared at the entrance with a sinister smile on their faces. The group of more than a dozen people had completely surrounded Yi Shiwen, not giving him any opportunity to escape. More than a dozen divine senses had locked onto him. Chapter 2569. Leave your corpse intact? That's great. The demon-calling banner needs to devour a lot of chi and blood in order to grow. Since you've come to me, don't even think about leaving. Yi Shiwen sneered. When those people heard this, they were so angry that they almost twisted their heads. There were so many of them, and their strength was firmly above Yi Shiwen's. Not only was this guy not afraid, but he actually dared to speak so arrogantly. He was simply courting death. The bald man didn't even bother to continue talking nonsense. He directly blasted a punch towards Yi Shiwen, like a meteor crashing over. The fist force burst and turned into a myriad of stars. The fist force spread out and swept out in the air. In each fist force, there was endless power of laws. This punch also showed his extraordinary strength. Chungo had become the leader of these Sage Realm experts, and it was not that simple. This punch almost had the power to make heaven and earth tremble, making Yi Shiwen unable to escape or avoid it. You're courting death. You don't know what's good for you. I didn't have time to argue with you just now, so I let you live. Now you dare to come and court death. In the face of the fist force that blasted towards him, Yi Shiwen stood still and let it hit him. Everywhere collapsed, but he did not move at all. His face was extremely cold. When he was about to arrive in front of Yi Shiwen finally made his move. He spread out his palm, and a huge sword key condensed in his hand. Countless sword key condensed into a long river and instantly soared into the sky, forming an incomparably huge long river. It seemed as if it would split the sky apart. The sword chi splashed out from Yi Shiwen's hand and slashed down from the sky, breaking the bald man's fist force completely. The bald man's fist power did not even come into contact with Yi Shiwen's fur before it was completely destroyed. What kind of sword force is this? How can it be so powerful? The bald man was shocked and retreated again and again. His shield of vigor showed signs of collapsing in front of this sword force. You have to see how strong you are if you want to play tricks on me. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sneer. In an instant, he crossed through space and came in front of the bald man. The sword force in his hand kept spinning, growing, and directly stabbed out. Boom! Ji's sword light traversed the sky, piercing through the firmament. Endless sword chi erupted behind him, almost forming a world of the way of the sword. Boss! After all, they hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would be so terrifying. So, they unleashed their divine nations one after another in order to delay Yi Shiwen's footsteps. Countless god laws transformed into huge hands and grabbed towards Yi Shiwen. Courting death! Yi Shiwen shouted coldly and suddenly stopped. He suddenly waved his palm, and countless sword energies swept out. These divine kingdoms that were spreading over collapsed in an instant. They weren't a match for Yi Shiwen at all. Those nomological hands also shattered in an instant and drifted away in the wind. Pooh! 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 These people who rushed over in a hurry were swept by Yi Shiwen's sword force. Their attacks were disintegrated and most importantly, their whole body was seriously injured, and their flesh was sent flying. But Yi Shiwen was still unforgiving. He didn't give them the slightest chance to escape. The Dominator's sword intent rose with the wind, and in a few breaths, it grew to thousands of feet long. With a sweep, these people who were sent flying didn't even have a chance to escape. Bang! 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 In an instant, they turned into a mass of blood mist. Their wealth was absorbed by the Tianyuan mirror, and their flesh and blood were swallowed by the demon flag. Whether it was their blood essence or spirit, they were all fed to the endless monsters. In a short while, such a huge amount of blood essence had been swallowed up. How dare you? The bald man opened his eyes wide, and tears of blood flowed out of his eyes. These people had gone through countless battles and grew up together. It could be said that they were like brothers. Previously, one of them had died, and now all of them were dead. Only he was left. How could he not be angry? The spiritual power of his whole body was burning, and his height grew by more than 10 feet. Yi Shiwen seemed to have shrunk a lot all of a sudden. His body was strong, just like a demon god. He opened a huge gap between heaven and earth, and countless chaotic forces were drawn down by him and instilled into his body, making his spiritual power more and more powerful. The strong wind set off by the bald man made Yi Shiwen's clothes flutter. At this moment, the bald man raised his strength to the peak, and it was getting stronger and stronger. Die! He roared, and once again blasted out a punch, and directly blasted towards Yi Shiwen's head. He wanted to directly blow Yi Shiwen up. This won't do. If you burn too much of your blood essence, won't I lose? Yi Shiwen did not care about the bald man's attack at all. He was actually afraid that the bald man would burn all of his blood essence. This sentence immediately made the bald man seething with anger, and he almost died alive. This punch blasted down like lightning, and its momentum was infinite. It was extremely fast, and it came and went like a ghost. Dang! A huge roar sounded, like the sound of gold and iron colliding. His terrifying punch was easily blocked by Yi Shiwen. Every pore of Yi Shiwen's body began to spew out a strong sword aura. Before the bald man had time to react, Yi Shiwen's sword intention had already swept out, and a terrifying sword momentum swept out. All of the bald man's attacks collapsed inch by inch the moment the sword momentum appeared. Moreover, this force was still spreading and fell on the bald man's body. Boom! All the defenses on the bald man's body collapsed in an instant. This terrifying pressure could not be resisted at all. I will fight with you. At this time, the bald man was not only bleeding from his eyes. Every pore on his body was bleeding, and his internal organs were shattered by the shock. He opened his mouth and roared, and his body exploded. He wanted to hit Yi Shiwen at the last moment, and maybe he could save the situation. He roared, and a ray of light pierced through the sky, blasted at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen just sneered and ignored him. The sword momentum slowly slashed down. He didn't give him any chance to breathe at all. He defeated his counterattack. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, he had smashed all his defenses and cut into his body. The bald man screamed, and his whole body exploded. Endless sword intention raged inside him, crushing every inch of his body. He turned into a bloody mist and was absorbed by the demon calling banner. After absorbing the essence and blood of a master in the late stage of the Sage Plane, there was a huge change in the demon calling banner. Many monsters of the Companion Plane reached the power of the Doctrine Plane in one fell swoop, and many monsters of the Immortal Plane directly entered the Eternal Plane. There were even a few Eternal Plane monsters who entered the Sage Plane. However, there were no changes at the Sage Plane, but Yi Shiwen was not anxious. After knowing the method, all that was left was to keep feeding them. Sooner or later, he would have an unparalleled army. Although the souls of the demon race masters were not real gods, they could exert power comparable to that of the Doctrine Plane, and that was enough. Yi Shiwen was only raising a group of fighters, and he did not really want to raise a lot of Doctrine Plane gods. Yi Shiwen sighed slightly. He looked at the scene of devastation in the entire medicinal garden. It had been destroyed in the battle. He rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he had arrived early. Otherwise, he wouldn't know whose hands the reincarnation grass would have fallen into if he had arrived late. Now that the reincarnation grass was in his hands, the biggest worry in his heart was finally put to rest. Yi Xuan did not stop and went straight out of the temple. He did not even take a second look and went straight back to the city in the swamp. Anyway, he had nowhere to go for the time being, so he naturally chose to stay here. At this time, most people had died in the swamp, and those who were alive simply went to explore the temple. None of them came back, so no one fought with Yi Xuan for a place to stay. After half a year, there were very few people who did not know what to do. The people in the city were also very clear about the habits of this strange person. He did not casually get involved in other things, but once he was provoked, there was only a dead end. Some people were very surprised that Yi Xuan came back so early, but Yi Xuan immediately went into closed-door training, and everyone soon lost interest. Soon, more and more news spread out from the temple. Many people had discovered some treasures in the temple. It seemed that they had obtained a great harvest. However, this couldn't shake Yi Xuan's will. In fact, it didn't even cause a ripple in his heart. But soon, the casualties in the temple increased. There were more and more conflicts between outsiders and natives, natives and natives, and outsiders. People could be heard fighting almost every day, and there were deities falling. Such battles could not be said to not be fierce. 3 years later, a heavy news came. More than 200 deities had fallen in one day, because the evil god worshipped in the temple seemed to have awakened. It was stimulated by the chi, blood, and essence of these deities who were fighting, and it seemed to have awakened into a monster, like a zombie. The more than 200 deities did not have time to escape, and those who were alive and did not receive the news were among them. If they were not careful, they would be completely annihilated. There were even many top experts in the sage realm, but without exception, none of them escaped. As soon as this news spread out, it shook the small city. Countless people instantly regarded the temple as a peerless and dangerous place. According to many people's speculations, unless a peerless genius entered, it was likely that no one would be able to do anything to the monster in the temple. So everyone could only give up, except for a small number of people who were not willing to give up and were not afraid of death. Most had left the small city. Time flew. Chapter 2570. It was a bloody world. In Tianyuan Mirror, it seemed to be an eternal picture. In the distance, the Avicii sword was constantly struggling to break free. Its fierce aura was locked by countless chains of law. This had consumed most of the power of the heavenly source mirror. The infinite pain sword was still a big trouble even when it wasn't in use. So, it couldn't be underestimated. Otherwise, it might backfire if one wasn't careful. Yi Xuan didn't want to encounter such a thing. There was a lake of thunder liquid in front of Yi Xuan. The rumbling of thunder could be heard everywhere. The power of thunder could be seen flashing everywhere. It seemed like an independent kingdom of thunder. A person was lying in the thunder liquid lake. She was dressed in a light blue gown. She was lying in the thunder liquid lake with a calm expression. The enlightening mind ancient tree was emitting 7-colored light all the time. It enveloped her and protected her from the invasion of evil spirits. Even so, her face was still covered with black vein patterns. It was the invasion of the power of death. The erosion of the power of death on Yi Qianqian's body had become more and more serious over the past 1,000 years, even though the thunder liquid lake and the enlightening mind ancient tree were both stabilizing her. Yi Xuan was sitting cross-legged next to the thunder liquid lake. Innumerable divine sources were burning in the distance. They transformed into spirit energies and principles and poured into his body. His body was like a wooden barrel that could never be filled. No matter how much spirit energies were poured into his body, it would never be satisfied. Not even a trace of spirit energies would leak out. He had sealed every pore of his body so that spirit energies couldn't seep out. The aura on his body was constantly fluctuating. It was faintly discernible. It was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Countless principles had formed a long dragon or a phoenix. They had formed countless strange phenomena and had manifested behind him. A large mass of light source essence had finally been digested in his body. It had been madly digested under the operation of observing person scripture. The universe within Yi Shiwen's body seemed to be inexhaustible. The universe within Yi Shiwen's body was also constantly upgrading. Many planets had already been upgraded into worlds. Countless creatures were living in them. He had integrated his divine kingdom into the universe within his body. He had been using his magic power to nourish his divine kingdom every day. Crackle. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen's body started to emit countless crackling sounds. Each of these sounds was like a violent explosion. They were all erupting from his body, accompanied by boundless spiritual qi. It was as if worlds were being destroyed and rebuilt. The phenomenon around him was truly shocking. Yi Shiwen looked up to the sky and let out a long and loud roar. His voice was clear and cold. Along with this loud and long roar, all his bad luck seemed to have been directly driven away by this long and loud roar. All the barriers between his realms also collapsed in an instant. Boom! A series of explosions resounded, and the aura around Yi Shiwen's body continued to sweep and distort. A terrifying power was surging out of him. After a long while, this power finally calmed down. Yi Shiwen slowly opened his eyes and said, "I'm finally in the middle stage of the Sage Plane. I've finally broken into the middle stage of the Sage Plane after swallowing a source of light. After stepping into the Sage Plane, it's too difficult to advance further." Although he had stepped into the middle stage of the Sage Plane not long after breaking into the early stage of the Sage Plane, which seemed fast, in reality, it was also the result of swallowing the source of light. Otherwise, although he might not have been like others, who could only advance one step in 10,000 years, it would have been impossible for him to achieve results so quickly. Fortunately, he had finally succeeded. These few years had not been a waste. Not only had he stepped into the middle stage of the Sage Plane, but his combat power had not fallen behind, and he had truly rushed into the peak of the Sage Plane. In the Kurfürst Road, he had truly entered the ranks of the top. Although he was still a little weaker than the monstrous geniuses, he was stronger than the ordinary old antiques at the peak of the Sage Plane. Right now, he had only just stepped into the middle stage of the Sage Plane. When he reached the peak of the middle stage of the Sage Plane in one fell swoop, even those monstrous geniuses would be nothing to him. By then, his combat power would be infinitely close to the King Plane. And now, he only needed a little more accumulation. After all, there was no barrier between the middle stage of the Sage Plane and the peak of the middle stage of the Sage Plane. As long as he accumulated enough, he could automatically step into that plane and be comparable to monstrous geniuses. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen was still very satisfied, although he had not yet reached the peak of the Sage Plane. Yi Shiwen withdrew all the aura on his body, and in an instant, it was completely gone. He stood up and looked at Yi Qianqian, who was lying quietly in the lake of thunder liquid, like a peerless sleeping beauty. Soon, all of this would be over. Countless laws flickered around him as he moved. It was as if he had touched upon another plane. While he was still far from the pinnacle of the Sage Plane, his powers had vaguely touched upon the limits of that plane. The next plane would be the Tidal King Plane. Yi Shiwen flipped his palm, and the sway fire essence appeared in his hand. He had already erased its consciousness, and all that was left was the fusion of endless energy. As long as he swallowed it, he would be able to reach the peak of the middle stage of the Sage Plane in a few years, and there would be no side effects. At the moment, this was the only natural treasure that he could swallow that was useful for his current plane, and the Golden-backed Dragon Carp King had not completed its final evolution, so it was not the time to swallow it yet. Just as he was about to continue swallowing the sway fire essence and take advantage of the situation to push his cultivation to the peak of the middle stage of the Sage Plane, there was a sudden ripple in the space, and a beam of light broke through the void and flew in. Yi Shiwen caught it, and his expression changed. It was Gu Shuriying's message talisman. Her message talisman informed him that she had found the spring and autumn brush and asked him to meet up with her as soon as possible. Yi Shiwen was confident that he could kill Jun Dingtian with his own hands, and even if he were to run into those monsters, he would be able to protect himself. If worse came to worst, he could still retreat. The alliance was dispensable. But then again, he was a man, and he would not go back on his word. More importantly, if Jun Dingtian were to appear in the secret plane, it would be at this time. The reappearance of the spring and autumn brush would probably have attracted the attention of countless people. Jun Dingtian, it's time to settle the score. Yi Shiwen's expression was extremely solemn, and in the next second, his body disappeared from the Tianyuan mirror. At the same time, the news of the spring and autumn brush's reappearance spread over time. Even if the experts of the Confucian sect tried to suppress it, it was useless, and the news still spread. Many people had come for the spring and autumn brush, and now they were all on the move. Far away in the sky, there was an incomparably huge mountain floating in the sky. The entire mountain was not formed naturally. Instead, it was a type of celestial device, a very powerful high-grade celestial device. On top of the mountain, there were many tyrannical auras entrenched. There were actually living beings living on it. The mountain was not a nameless ritual implement, but a very famous ritual implement in the indefinite spirit cult, the indefinite sacred mountain. The indefinite spirit cult took its name from the indefinite spirit cult, which meant that the heavenly Tao was impermanent, and indefinite. They wanted to control the only variable and seize the fate of the heavens. It was also a powerful cult that was crowned with kings. The indefinite sacred mountain was also very powerful, and it kept moving in the void like a meat grinder. No matter what kind of ferocious creature it was, it would explode on the spot when it came into contact with the indefinite sacred mountain. At this time, there were countless demons surrounding and attacking the indefinite sacred mountain. It should be said that the indefinite sacred mountain had directly attacked the demon's lair. On the indefinite sacred mountain, the disciples of the indefinite spirit cult could continue to hunt and kill these demons, enrich themselves, and plunder wealth. Their strength continued to grow, and they were getting stronger with every passing moment. Almost all of the demons were killed by the indefinite sacred mountain, and they became nutrients for the indefinite sacred mountain, and even the master of the indefinite sacred mountain. It was like a giant, and it was simply invincible. At this time, in a huge and luxurious palace on the indefinite sacred mountain, the master of the indefinite sacred mountain, a demonic young man, suddenly opened his eyes. This young man was about 9 feet tall and handsome. However, there were silver scales shining on his forehead, revealing his identity. He was not a human, but a powerful race. "Come out, friend. Since you're here, why don't you show yourself?" he said slowly. As his voice fell, a tall and straight figure appeared in front of him, like a king of the heavens, looking down on the world. "Jun Dingtian, it's you. What are you doing here instead of cultivating?" The master of the indefinite sacred mountain seemed to know Jun Dingtian and said directly, "As an ally, isn't it normal for me to come and see you?" Jun Dingtian said with a smile, "Wu Dingzi, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you're already close to that barrier. You're really good. In the end, there's still a difference. But it won't be long. I'll be at the peak of the Sage Plain soon. When that time comes, compared to those monsters, I'll only be lacking in the accumulation of skills. When I return to the cult, I'll consume a few treasures of heaven and earth, and I'll be able to challenge those monsters immediately." "What's the big deal?" Wu Dingzi said with pride. "Your strength isn't bad either. With the two of us working together, who could be a match for us? It'll be a piece of cake for us to sweep through this secret zone. If you really think that, then you really don't know when you're about to die." Jun Dingtian said coldly, "You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.